I'm Jason, 27 years old, and Thanksgiving 2023 was supposed to be the first normal family gathering in years. That's what I told myself anyway, as I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the collar of a shirt I hadn't worn since college graduation. It still fit, somehow. I hadn't seen most of my extended family in over a year. Not since my uncle's retirement party where my mom, Diane, got embarrassingly drunk and tried to convince everyone I was some hotshot financial advisor in New York. For the record, I wasn't. I was still in town, living in a shoebox of a rental and juggling 2 jobs just to stay afloat after getting laid off. The only reason I was going to this dinner was because Aunt Valerie, Mom's older sister, personally called and insisted I come. And when Aunt Val asks you for something, you don't say no. She was the only one in the family who never talked down to me, who actually remembered my birthday without Facebook reminders, and who once told me quietly during my cousin's wedding, "You were never the failure. You were just outnumbered." So I showed up. I parked my beat-up Honda 2 blocks away so nobody would see it sputter, fixed my hair in the reflection of someone's SUV window, and walked into the house like I belonged there. The place was huge, bigger than I remembered. Aunt Val's home was always warm and classy, the kind of place where the fireplace is real and people drink wine out of tall glasses without stems. The air smelled like rosemary, turkey, and something else I couldn't place at first. I didn't see my mom right away, which was a relief. I wasn't ready for her usual comments about how tired I looked or how I should smile more. Instead, I was greeted by my cousin Amanda, who was too preoccupied taking selfies with her boyfriend to notice me, and then by my uncle Greg, who gave me a stiff nod like we were business partners instead of family. The dinner table was enormous, decked out with gold-rimmed plates and enough food to feed a small village. I found a seat near the end, tucked between a chair reserved for the kids and a crystal bowl full of cranberry sauce nobody would touch. I was reaching for a roll when I heard Aunt Val's voice cut through the conversation like a knife through butter. "So, Jason," she said, setting down her wine glass with a gentle clink. "How's the apartment I bought you last year?" The room stilled. I froze, my hand still hovering over the bread basket. I turned toward her, blinking like she'd just spoken in a foreign language. "What apartment?" I asked, not even trying to mask the confusion in my voice. Her smile faltered for just a second, just one beat. But that was all it took for the air to shift. Her gaze flicked to my mother, who was sitting across from her, cheeks already red from wine. Mom's hand jerked, and her glass tilted a little too fast. Merlot spilled down the front of her blouse. She cursed under her breath and grabbed a napkin, dabbing furiously, eyes fixed on the table. "Diane," Aunt Val said, her voice suddenly colder. Mom didn't answer at first. She just shook her head and muttered something about clumsy hands. But then Aunt Val leaned forward slightly and said, louder this time, "You never told him, did you?" That's when the silence broke, just not in the way I expected. Grandma coughed. Amanda giggled, but it was the nervous kind, the way someone laughs in a horror movie right before the lights go out. My stomach sank. I slowly put down the roll and sat back, arms crossed. "Told me what?" I asked, looking directly at my mother. She stared at the napkin like it held the answers to a test she never studied for. "That was supposed to be private," she mumbled, still not meeting anyone's gaze. "A family matter. Aunt Val bought me an apartment?" I asked again, louder this time. "Is that true?" Valerie nodded slowly. "Yes. I bought it for you last fall, after you lost your job. I wired the down payment directly, even covered a year's HOA fees in advance. Diane said you'd moved in." It felt like my lungs forgot how to work. My face must have gone pale because Amanda finally looked up from her phone. Uncle Greg muttered something under his breath. I stared at my mom, waiting, needing her to say it wasn't true, that it was some mistake, a mix-up. Instead, she slammed the napkin down and snapped. "Do you have any idea how ungrateful you sound right now?" "What?" I asked, my voice cracking from the shock. "You took an apartment that was meant for me and never told me? You think life's that simple?" she hissed. "You don't just get handouts, Jason. You needed to learn responsibility, to stand on your own 2 feet. I blinked. "So your solution was to what? Lie to your own sister? Steal from me?" Her face hardened. "We used the money for your brother." Of course. Of course it was about Evan. My younger brother, the golden child. The one who crashed his 3rd car this year and somehow still had his tuition covered. The one who hadn't worked a single day in his life but got a new MacBook every Christmas. My jaw tightened. What do you mean, use the money? I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I knew. My mom waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. Evan was going through a hard time. He needed help getting back on his feet. He deserved a safe place to live too. You gave him my apartment, I said flatly. It wasn't yours yet, she snapped. The room was dead quiet now. All eyes were on us. Aunt Val sat frozen, her wine forgotten. I could hear someone's fork clinking against a plate at the far end of the table, then stopping. Nobody spoke. And what? You were just going to keep lying about it? I asked, voice low but sharp. Pretend it never happened? My mom leaned back in her chair, folding her arms like a teenager caught in a lie. You wouldn't have appreciated it. You waste opportunities. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned to Aunt Val. Can you tell me where this apartment is? She blinked, then stood up slowly. Yes, I have the paperwork. I never heard from you after the wire transfer, but I trusted your mother when she said you were settled. My mom let out a sharp laugh, but it was hollow. This is ridiculous. We're airing this out over turkey and potatoes. No, I said, standing. You aired it out. When you lied. For over a year. My hands were shaking, but I kept them clenched at my sides. Aunt Val looked livid. My mom was seething. My brother, Evan, wasn't even at the table. He was upstairs, no doubt playing games or streaming something on the giant TV he probably bought with money scraped from the life I should have had. I want to see the place, I said quietly. Tonight. My mom opened her mouth to argue, but Aunt Val cut her off. I'll drive you. Mom's chair scraped back suddenly as she stood. You're not taking him there. Valerie didn't even flinch. You don't get to stop me. I'm his mother. You stopped acting like his mother when you stole from him. I didn't know what stunned me more, Aunt Val's words, or the way Mom visibly recoiled like she'd been slapped. The entire room was holding its breath. And that's when the yelling started. It wasn't me. It wasn't even Aunt Val. It came from the stairs. You promised they'd never find out. It was Evan, and his voice was panicked, scrambling, guilty. I turned slowly and locked eyes with my brother at the top of the stairs, face pale, jaw slack, like a boy caught breaking into the cookie jar, but finding himself on national television instead. And that's when it all began to unravel. Evan stood frozen on the stairs, his hand gripping the railing like it was the only thing keeping him from collapsing. His usual smug confidence, the look he wore every holiday while making backhanded comments about my job, my car, or my haircut, was gone. Now, he looked like a man staring down the barrel of a truth he couldn't dodge. You promised, Mom, he repeated, quieter this time, his voice shaking. Aunt Val turned to him, her eyes narrow and sharp. Promised what, Evan? My mom's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked between him and me like a cornered animal, like she might bolt from the room. And I saw it for the first time, not just guilt, but fear. I didn't know what else to do, she said finally, her voice trembling. You have to understand, he was in trouble. Serious trouble. Aunt Val's voice was cold. What kind of trouble? Evan took a shaky breath. Debt. That one word hit the room like a thunderclap. I stepped forward. What do you mean, debt? You told me last year you got a bonus and were looking at apartments downtown. That was before things got bad. He muttered, eyes on the floor. I got into this crypto thing. Some guys convinced me it was a guaranteed flip. I pulled some money from Mom's account, just short term, but then it crashed and I couldn't cover it. My heart pounded in my chest. So she stole the apartment meant for me, to cover your crypto debt? My mom flinched. It wasn't just that. Then what else? She said it was an investment. Evan jumped in. That the place would be in her name for a year or two, and then she'd transfer it to me. To you? I barked. I didn't know it was originally meant for you, he said quickly, holding up his hands. She told me Aunt Val gave it to her to use however she wanted. That's not true, Val snapped. I told her specifically, explicitly, it was a gift to help Jason land on his feet. Not her. Not you. My mom finally stood up, knocking over her chair in the process. Her voice was high and desperate. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your youngest child fall apart in front of you? To see him scared and ashamed and know you're the only one who can help. You were supposed to be helping me, I said, my voice low and bitter. You knew I was drowning. You knew I was behind on rent. And you let me stay in that dump while you handed my apartment to Evan and lied about it for an entire year. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her silence said it all. You lied to Aunt Val, I added. To your own sister. I had to, Jason, she said, tears in her eyes now. If she found out Evan was gambling with money he didn't have, it would have destroyed him. She always favored you anyway. I had to do what was best for my son. I stared at her in stunned silence. I am your son, I said, my voice shaking. You were fine, she said quickly. You've always been so independent. You figure things out. I knew you'd survive. No, I said slowly. You knew I wouldn't make a scene, that I wouldn't ask questions, that I'd swallow it all and just keep going. That's why you picked me. The table was still full, but no one was eating. Someone's fork slipped to the floor with a soft clang. Grandma was watching with wide eyes, her lips pressed tightly together. Amanda had stopped filming and looked genuinely horrified. Uncle Greg looked like he wanted to disappear into his wine glass. Aunt Val took a long, controlled breath. You forged my name on documents, didn't you? My mom didn't respond. I'm not stupid, Diane, Val continued. I wired the money to a closing company, not to you. You must have intercepted it. Redirected the paperwork. That's the only way Jason wouldn't have heard a word from anyone. Evan's face turned gray. Wait, you forged legal documents? Don't act like you didn't benefit from it. I snapped. You knew something was off, and you didn't care. Aunt Val pulled out her phone. I want the address. Now. I'm calling my lawyer. Please, Val, Mom whispered. It was never supposed to go this far. Oh, it's going a lot farther, Val said. You messed with the wrong person's name, Diane. I kept my mouth shut for years when you insulted me behind my back and made passive comments about my career. But not this. You stole from your own child and dragged my name into it. The sound of Evan's footsteps retreating upstairs echoed through the house. I didn't follow him. I was done chasing ghosts. Jason, Aunt Val said gently, I'll make this right. I nodded, but I wasn't sure what right even looked like anymore. The anger in my chest was burning so hot I felt numb. I kept thinking about all the nights I spent working late, scrounging for groceries, walking home because I couldn't afford gas. And all that time, there was a warm, safe place waiting for me that I never even knew existed. And now? Now I had 1,000 questions, and no one I could trust to answer them. Not without more lies. That's when my mom finally looked up at me, her eyes bloodshot and pleading. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. You didn't mean for me to find out, I replied. And I turned to Aunt Val and said, let's go. I want to see it. Without a word, she grabbed her coat and her purse, her heels clicking across the hardwood. I didn't look back as we walked out the door. But just before I stepped outside, I heard my mom's voice, barely above a whisper, say something I'll never forget. If he takes that apartment, Evan's life will fall apart. And I didn't even hesitate before replying. Then he'll finally know how it feels. The front door shut behind us, cutting off whatever sound came next. And that was just the beginning. Aunt Val's car was quiet as we pulled away from the house, the driveway shrinking in the rearview mirror like a fading memory I didn't want to revisit anytime soon. The heater hummed low, and neither of us spoke for a while. I stared out the window, watching the neat rows of houses blur past, lights twinkling behind curtains, families gathered around tables. Thanksgiving. For most people, it meant warmth, gratitude, second helpings, and sleepy comfort. For me, it had just become the night everything I thought I knew about my family shattered. Jason, Aunt Val finally said, her voice soft but firm, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I nodded, but I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to rage, to ask how she could have missed the signs. But the truth was, she'd been lied to just like I had. Mom had manipulated both of us, and for what? To keep Evan comfortable, to keep the fantasy of his innocence alive. I believed her when she said you were settling in and didn't want to make a big fuss about it, Val continued. She even told me you didn't want her to tell me where it was because you were embarrassed. I gave a short, bitter laugh. That sounds like her. She always knew how to spin a story, she muttered, hands tightening on the steering wheel. When we were kids, she could talk her way out of anything. But this, she shook her head. This is a different level. We turned onto a quieter street, older buildings lining the sidewalk. There was a certain charm to the area, tall trees arching over the road, their bare branches lit by scattered street lamps. A dog barked in the distance. A couple walked hand in hand, bundled up in scarves. Here, she said, slowing to a stop in front of a 3-story brick building. It looked clean, well kept. The kind of place where people nodded politely to their neighbors and left shoes outside their doors. A small, metal placard above the buzzer read Willow Court. You're kidding, I muttered. This is it. She nodded. Third floor. Corner unit. It gets afternoon sun. I toured it myself before wiring the payment. It was supposed to be a fresh start for you. We sat in silence, staring up at the dark windows. I wondered which one Evan had claimed as his own. Which room had my name on it before it was scrubbed from the plan. Do you want to go up? She asked gently. I hesitated. Part of me did. Desperately. But another part, the hurt, exhausted part, wasn't ready to see it yet. I didn't want to step into a life I was never allowed to have. Not when I could still feel the cold betrayal of having it stolen from me. Not tonight, I said quietly. Not while he's still living there. She nodded. That's fair. I'll get the keys. We pulled away, and as we drove back to her place, she filled me in on the details I'd missed. The emails, the transfer forms, the confirmation letters that Mom must have intercepted or redirected. It all painted a clearer picture. My mother hadn't just lied. She'd engineered the entire thing. Carefully. Deliberately. Every lie stacked on top of the last. Woven into a believable narrative she could sell to both sides. And the more I heard, the more I realized just how deep it all went. She signed your name on the mortgage addendum, Aunt Val said, pulling into her driveway. There's no mistaking it. And she added Evan as an occupant. I felt my stomach turn. Is that legal? She parked the car and turned to face me. Not without your consent, no? Especially not if I specify the gift was for you. The implication hung in the air. There were consequences to what Mom had done. Real ones. And suddenly, the path forward was clear. There were documents to gather, lawyers to call, and choices to be made. I could take this to court. I could expose every lie, every signature, every stolen word. But more than that, I could take back what was mine. Later that night, as I lay on the pull-out couch in Aunt Val's guest room, I stared at the ceiling, thoughts spinning like wheels in mud. I replayed everything. Mom's justifications. Evan's panic. The way my name was erased from my own future without a second thought. I kept thinking about the apartment, about what it would have meant to walk into a place and know it was mine. To hang my coat on a hook I installed. To sleep in a bed that didn't creak every time I turned over. To invite people over without feeling ashamed. I thought about Evan, living there right now, probably texting someone about the family drama, like it was a soap opera. Did he even understand what he'd taken from me? Probably not. He never had to. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and fresh cinnamon rolls. Aunt Val was already at the table, papers spread out around her like a war map. Morning, she said, handing me a mug. Hope you're ready. We've got work to do. I rubbed my eyes and sat down. You're serious about this? Her eyes didn't waver. Your mother made a mistake, and she's going to face the consequences. But more importantly, you are going to reclaim what was meant for you. There was something fierce in her voice. Steely, like she'd been waiting for an excuse to stop tolerating Diane's games. And now she had one. We went through everything. Emails she'd forwarded to my mom, transfer receipts, property tax statements. There it was, in black and white, my name, removed. My mother's signature, where mine should have been. Evan's name slipped in like a quiet thief in the night. But as we pieced it all together, something else began to surface. A pattern. Other inconsistencies. Other accounts where things didn't quite add up. And that's when Aunt Val paused, scanning one of the bank statements she'd printed. Jason, did you know your grandmother left you a savings bond in her will? My heart skipped. No, I didn't even know she had a will. She did, she said, frowning. And she left something to both you and Evan. Equal amounts. But according to the records, only Evan's was cashed. I stared at her. What? Val's eyes narrowed. It was supposed to mature last year. And it was tied to your social security number. But someone claimed it. My blood ran cold. You think my mom forged that too? She didn't answer. Because she didn't have to. And in that moment, I realized. The apartment was just the beginning. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I wasn't. Not anymore. By the time Aunt Val uncovered the stolen savings bond, I'd crossed some invisible line. The old version of me, the one who gave the benefit of the doubt, who let things slide to keep the peace, was gone. Replaced by someone who'd finally woken up to the truth. I'd spent most of my life playing the quiet son, the forgiving brother, the invisible man in my own family story. And my mother had written me out of the plot with a smile on her face. Over the next week, I stayed at Aunt Val's house while we gathered every document, every receipt, every shred of proof we could find. She had a good lawyer, one of her oldest friends, someone she'd once mentored when he was fresh out of law school. His name was Henry, and he didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. She committed fraud, he said flatly after reviewing the documents. Forgery, misappropriation of funds, identity misuse. Depending on how far you want to push this, Jason, she could be looking at real consequences. Real consequences. The words rang in my ears for days. I didn't want to destroy her. I didn't want to destroy anyone. But I also couldn't keep pretending that what she did could be brushed under the rug. That it was just a family matter to be solved over a casserole and some awkward apologies. She stole from me. She stole my home. She stole the one financial gift ever given to me, and she handed it to my brother like it was hers to redistribute. So I gave Henry the green light. He filed a cease and desist first, addressed to both my mother and Evan, ordering them to vacate the apartment within 30 days. Included was the original deed transfer Aunt Val had prepared in my name, along with notarized evidence that her funds were earmarked specifically for me. Henry had also requested a formal audit of the savings bond transaction. The paper trail showed my mother had used my SSN to claim it under a forged signature, depositing the amount, just over $15,000, into her personal account before immediately transferring half to Evan and using the rest to upgrade his vehicle. We sent a separate notice to the bank. It didn't take long before the house of cards began to collapse. The first call came from my mother. I didn't answer. She tried again, then again, texted, left voicemails, each one more frantic than the last. It went from, "We need to talk," to "You're blowing this out of proportion," to "How could you do this to your own mother?" Then came Evan. His messages weren't apologetic. They were furious. "What is wrong with you, man? You're ruining my life over an apartment you didn't even know existed. I didn't ask her to do that. Don't take it out on me. You're just jealous that someone finally treated me like I mattered." That one stung more than I expected, and it brought back a wave of memories. Birthdays forgotten, praise withheld, moments when I watched my mom beam at Evan like he was the second coming while I sat in the background, waiting for my turn. It never came. I stopped expecting it. The day Henry served them in person was the day everything changed. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. But Aunt Val called me afterward, her voice tight with barely contained anger. She cried, she said she didn't mean to hurt you, that it was all for Evan's future. But when I asked about the bond, she clammed up. Evan tried to defend her, but he didn't even know what she'd done until today. "Doesn't matter," I said. "They both benefited. They can both move out." 30 days passed, and I got the keys. The apartment was empty when I walked in, stripped of furniture, of personality, of any trace that Evan had lived there. There were some scuff marks on the walls, a faint outline where a couch had once rested, and a weird smell I couldn't quite place, something between too much cologne and desperation. But it was mine. I stood in the doorway for a long time, letting the silence wrap around me like a second skin. No shouting, no tension, no guilt hanging in the air. Just a space that had waited quietly, patiently, for its rightful owner to arrive. Aunt Val helped me furnish it. Nothing extravagant, just clean, simple pieces. A couch that didn't sink when I sat on it. A real bed. A small dining table where I could eat without balancing a plate on my lap. She even brought me a plant. "You're an adult now," she said with a smile. "You need something to neglect." I laughed. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel forced. I didn't hear from my mother for a while after that. I knew the silence was temporary. I braced for it. When she finally showed up, it wasn't at my door. It was at Aunt Val's, uninvited. I was there, helping Val reorganize her garage when I heard the knock. When I opened the door and saw her standing there, pale and small against the backdrop of a sunny afternoon, my stomach clenched. "Jason," she said softly, "please, can we talk?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I just want to understand," she said. "Why you do this? Why I do this?" I repeated, "Mom, you stole from me. You lied for over a year. You took what wasn't yours and gave it away like it was a toy you could rewrap for someone else. I didn't think you needed it as much as he did," she said. "You've always been the strong one." "No," I said. "I was just quiet." "That's not the same thing." She looked down, her hands shaking. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "Every day for over a year. You chose to lie. And when you had chances to fix it, you doubled down. That's not a mistake. That's betrayal." She looked like she wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Maybe even they had given up on her. I lost you, she whispered. No, I said. You threw me away. You just didn't expect me to come back and pick myself up. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said. I'm doing this because I deserve better. And because maybe if I finally stand up for myself, you'll think twice before doing this to someone else. She didn't reply, just nodded and walked away. I haven't seen her since. Evan texted me once after that. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I moved into the apartment the following weekend. Aunt Val came over with a bottle of sparkling cider, and we toasted on the small balcony while the sun dipped below the horizon. To new beginnings, she said. To finally being seen, I replied. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in my own life. I felt like the main one. I turned 40 last month, and if you asked me 2 weeks before that, I would have told you I had the best life a guy could ask for. My name's Mike, 40 years old, small business owner, husband, and dad of 2. I've always been the kind of person who believes that quiet effort pays off eventually. I worked hard, kept my head down, and provided. I wasn't flashy, but my family never went without. My wife, Lisa, liked to joke that I was the steady one, the type who'd rather fix a leaky pipe than go out drinking with friends. And honestly, I took pride in that. But lately, I'd been feeling something off in our house, like a quiet, invisible distance had settled between us. You ever feel like people around you are laughing about something you're not part of? That's how it started. For weeks leading up to my birthday, everyone kept dropping hints that they were planning something huge. Lisa would smile whenever I brought it up. You'll remember it forever, she'd tease, tapping her finger against my chest before walking off with that mysterious smirk. My brother, Chris, called me once saying, Big 4-0, huh? You're finally catching up to me, old man. You ready? My parents even asked if I could take a few days off work, which was odd because they usually forgot birthdays unless mom could post a picture about it. I figured maybe they were planning a surprise. I'd seen those videos, blindfolded people being led into a room full of friends shouting surprise. Maybe they were doing something like that. My kids, 12 and 15, kept whispering to each other and giggling whenever I entered the room. I'd ask what was so funny, and they'd just say, Nothing, Dad. In that way teenagers do when they think you're clueless. I pretended not to notice. Honestly, I liked the idea that maybe, for once, I was the center of something. See, I've always been the background guy in my own life. Chris was the charming one, the life of every party, the guy who never seemed to work but always had money. He was the fun uncle my kids adored and the golden boy my parents never stopped bragging about. I didn't mind most days. Someone had to be the reliable one. But every now and then, when I'd watch my wife laughing a little too long at one of his jokes, I'd feel that sting of being quietly overlooked. I buried it, of course. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. You tell yourself you're lucky. The night before my birthday, Lisa told me to sleep in the next morning. Just relax, she said, fluffing the pillow beside me. Don't check your phone. Don't make plans. Just trust me. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and said, All right, I trust you. I actually meant it. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pouring through the curtains and that quiet house feeling. No footsteps, no kids shouting, no coffee brewing. Just silence. I sat up, checked the clock. 9:40 a.m. No text. No note. Nothing. I figured maybe they were out getting breakfast or decorations. I showered, shaved, and put on a shirt Lisa said she loved, the navy one with rolled sleeves. By noon, still nothing. No happy birthday messages. No calls from mom or dad. Even Chris, who never missed an opportunity to tease me about my age, hadn't texted. I told myself maybe they were all just staying quiet for the surprise. Maybe they'd show up soon. I even set up the living room a bit, lit a candle, straightened up the couch, checked my phone every 5 minutes like an idiot waiting for a call that never came. By 3 p.m., my optimism started to rot. I texted Lisa, Everything okay? No response. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. I called my parents. Nothing. My brother. Voicemail. I even checked the group chat with some of my old friends. Silent since last week. I remember sitting there, staring at my phone, realizing it wasn't just a delay. Something was wrong. By 5 p.m., that hopeful feeling had completely died. I ordered takeout because sitting around waiting felt pathetic. I told myself maybe they planned something for the evening. I opened a beer, turned on the TV, tried to act like I didn't care. But my stomach twisted every time I heard a car outside. It was almost 7 p.m. when I finally opened social media. That's when my world shifted. The first post I saw was from Lisa. It was a photo. Her, our kids, my parents, Chris, and a few of our friends, all standing at a lake house. My lake house. The one I'd been paying off quietly for 3 years as an investment. They were all smiling, drinks in hand, with balloons and a banner in the background that said, "Here's to new beginnings." At first, I thought maybe it was a delayed surprise. Until I read the caption. "Don't worry, he's used to being left out." There were laughing emojis. People commented things like, "OMG savage," and "You guys are too much." Then came the videos. One showed Lisa splashing in the water, holding a champagne bottle. Another, the one that burned into my brain, showed her hugging Chris while everyone cheered. He shouted, "To family," and she laughed into his shoulder. My parents were clapping. My kids were smiling. And there I was, sitting in a dark living room, alone on my birthday, watching the people I loved celebrate without me, using my own property as their backdrop. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just sat there, the beer warm in my hand, feeling this strange calm wash over me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was like something inside me finally clicked. Like a puzzle piece snapping into place after years of pretending it didn't fit. I scrolled through every post, every photo, every comment. Some of my friends had tagged me, "Wish you were here, man." And I realized they probably thought I was invited. That's what made it worse. I wasn't even worth lying to properly. I was just erased. By 9 p.m., the silence of the house felt heavy, almost mocking. I could see the reflection of the screen in the window, my own face, expressionless, with that frozen image of Lisa and Chris behind it. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I got up, grabbed my wallet and passport from the drawer, and opened my laptop. It was one of those moments when you don't think, you just move. I booked a flight. Somewhere far enough that I wouldn't see their faces, but close enough that I could still handle things if I decided to. I left the lights on when I walked out, locked the door, looked back once, and whispered something I'd never said out loud before. "You win." But the thing about saying you win is sometimes it's not defeat. Sometimes it's just the start of something else. 2 days later, they found out what I did. And that's when my phone started ringing nonstop. When I got on that plane, I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay there another second pretending everything was normal. I booked a last-minute ticket to Denver because it was the first destination that popped up, packed a single bag, and turned my phone to airplane mode before takeoff. I remember staring out the window as the city lights shrank beneath me, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, freedom. Not happiness, not relief, just quiet freedom. Like a door that had been locked my whole life had finally opened, even if I didn't know where it led. When I landed, I checked into a modest hotel near the airport. The room was small, smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, but it felt peaceful. No raised voices, no passive-aggressive comments, no pretending. I ordered room service and turned my phone on. 17 missed calls. Lisa's name appeared first, followed by Mom, Dad, Chris, and even my daughter. Then the messages started loading. "Lisa, Mike, where are you? Lisa, we need to talk. Mom, don't do anything stupid, please. Chris, man, this isn't what you think. Lisa again, please call me. You don't understand." I scrolled through all of them slowly. The tone wasn't apologetic, it was panicked. Not because they realized they'd hurt me, but because they realized something was happening they couldn't control. I didn't reply. I wanted them to feel that silence. The next morning, I went to a diner near the hotel. The kind with sticky menus and burnt coffee that somehow tastes perfect when you're lost in thought. I sat there, thinking back to all the small moments I'd ignored over the years. The jokes at my expense, the little digs from Lisa, the way my parents praised Chris even when he messed up everything he touched. Like the time I bought my first house at 28. I'd saved every penny from my construction business, spent nights doing the wiring myself, and when I finally showed it to the family, Mom said, "Well, it's cute. Chris's condo is bigger, but this feels cozy." Chris laughed, slapped my back, and said, "You'll upgrade someday, little bro." I laughed too, pretending it didn't sting. Or when Lisa and I first got married, and she'd call my hard work boring stability. "You're not spontaneous," she'd say. "Chris knows how to live a little." At the time, I brushed it off. I thought she meant well. that she wanted me to relax. But over time, Chris knows how to live turned into Chris knows what people want, and Chris understands me. I'd tell myself it was just admiration. But deep down, I'd started noticing things. How she'd linger when he spoke. How she'd light up when he walked into a room. How his hand sometimes stayed on her shoulder a little too long when they hugged. I hated myself for even thinking it. Because once you start doubting, it's hard to stop. That birthday proved everything I tried to ignore. The caption wasn't just a joke, it was a confession. Don't worry, he's used to being left out. Who says that about their husband? Who lets their kids see that and laugh along? I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about my kids. Did they know? Did they think it was funny too? Or were they just doing what everyone else did? Going along because it was easier than speaking up? I couldn't decide what hurt more, Lisa's betrayal or my children's silence. By the third day, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mike? Thank God. It was Lisa's voice, shaky and rushed. Where are you? We've been trying to reach you for days. I stayed quiet for a few seconds before saying, You at the lake house? There was a pause. No. We came back yesterday. Mike, listen, it's not what it looked like, okay? It was supposed to be a joke. I laughed softly. A joke? My wife hugging my brother at my lake house while I sit home alone on my birthday. That's your definition of a joke. It wasn't like that, she insisted, her voice cracking. We were celebrating, and it just got out of hand. Everyone thought you were coming later. We were going to surprise you when you showed up. Really? I asked. That why the caption said I'm used to being left out? Silence. Then, that was Chris's idea. He thought it'd be funny. I didn't want him to post it. Lisa, I said quietly, stop lying. She didn't respond. Just a soft sound, like she was crying. Please, Mike, can you come home? The kids are worried. The kids didn't look too worried in those photos. Mike, you're scaring me. What did you do? That's when I realized she wasn't crying out of guilt. She was afraid. But not for me. For herself. I didn't do anything, I said calmly. But you'll find out soon enough. And then I hung up. After that, things started unraveling on their end. My parents left 3 voicemails, each more frantic than the last. Mom begged me to let it go, saying, Chris didn't mean anything by it. Dad's message was more direct. Whatever you're planning, don't make this a big deal. Family is family. That line always gets me. Family is family. It's what people say when they've hurt you, but still expect your loyalty. I used to believe it. I don't anymore. Over the next few days, I ignored everyone. I rented a car, drove into the mountains, and stayed at a small cabin I'd found years ago during a work trip. It had no internet, no TV, just a fireplace and the kind of silence that forces you to think. I spent hours writing everything down. The years of small slights, the humiliations, the sacrifices no one ever noticed. It felt like therapy, but colder. The lake house kept replaying in my mind. I'd bought that place quietly after one of my best years in business. I told Lisa it was for the family, something for the kids when they grew up. She'd said, it's too far out. Who's going to use it? Apparently, everyone but me. That's when the realization hit me. Everything they used to humiliate me was something I provided. The money, the comfort, the property, even the idea of the family gatherings came from me. I built the life they used to exclude me. That irony stung deep, but it also sharpened something inside me. When I finally went back online, I saw the fallout starting to show. Lisa had turned her account private. Chris deleted half his posts. My parents had disabled comments after people began calling them out. Apparently, one of my co-workers saw the photos and commented, "Wasn't this Mike's birthday?" That single comment had spiraled into chaos. People started asking questions. Neighbors messaged me saying they saw my family leaving in a rush after someone dropped off an envelope at the house. I hadn't sent anything yet, but that told me one thing. They were nervous. Good. That evening, as I sat by the fire, I got another message. It was from my daughter. Dad, can we talk? Please. That one broke me a little. She wasn't part of the scheme, not really. She was 15, caught between loyalty and confusion. I called her. Dad, she whispered. Where are you? Mom's freaking out. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said softly. Did you have fun at the lake? She hesitated. I didn't want to go. They said it was a surprise for you. But when we got there and you weren't coming, I asked why. Uncle Chris said you wouldn't fit the vibe. Mom told him to shut up. My throat tightened. You didn't post anything, did you? No. she said quickly. I didn't even take pictures. It was weird. Everyone was drinking and laughing. Grandma said you'd be fine. But when Mom and Uncle Chris went outside together, I heard them arguing. About you. That stopped me cold. Arguing? What about? I don't know exactly, she said quietly. I just heard Mom say, you promised it was done, and Chris said, relax, he'll never find out. For a moment, the world went still. I stared at the fire, hearing the crackle but not feeling its warmth. Thank you for telling me, sweetheart, I said. I need you to promise me something, okay? Stay out of it. Don't say anything to anyone. I'll handle this. Are you mad at Mom? I swallowed hard. Not mad, just disappointed. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I reached for my laptop. For years, I'd handled all the finances, joint accounts, business filings, property deeds, everything. Lisa never cared to look. Chris, on the other hand, had borrowed money from me more times than I could count, always promising to pay it back once the next thing hits. There was a paper trail, a long, ugly one. I didn't know what my endgame was yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just going to disappear. Not this time. The phone started buzzing again, vibrating across the wooden table. This time it was Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Mike, she said, relieved. Oh, thank God. Honey, please, just come home. We can fix this. You know how your brother gets when he drinks. Mom, I said evenly. How long has this been going on? Her breath caught. What are you talking about? Between Chris and Lisa. Silence. Then a faint, trembling sigh. Oh, Mike, please don't do this. That told me everything. I didn't yell. I didn't even hang up right away. I just said, thank you for confirming, and ended the call. Outside, snow had started falling in soft, quiet flakes. The kind that covers everything slowly, beautifully, like nature's way of erasing footprints before anyone can follow them. I stood by the window for a long time, watching it build up. By the time the sun rose, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And that's when their real panic began. I woke up the next morning to sunlight cutting through the cabin blinds, my phone vibrating again with missed calls. By now, the silence I'd given them wasn't just punishment, it was power. They were spinning, guessing, panicking. I could practically feel it through the phone screen. But I didn't move yet. I wanted to see how far they'd go before they broke their own cover. After making coffee, I opened my laptop again and went through the financial folders I'd kept synced to the cloud. I hadn't touched them in months, mostly because I trusted Lisa to manage the day-to-day household expenses. That was my first mistake. I scrolled through statements, receipts, and transfers. And that's when I saw it. Multiple withdrawals I didn't recognize. Thousands at a time, small enough to avoid triggering alerts, but steady, over a year. All under Lisa's name. At first, I thought maybe she was paying for something for the kids or the house. But then I noticed the memo lines. Investment transfer, property maintenance, loan repayment. Those weren't household transactions. Those were business terms. Mine. It led me down a rabbit hole. I started tracing where the money went. Turns out, Lisa and Chris had opened a small LLC together. It was registered under his name, but with her listed as an advisor. The company description? Luxury rental experiences. I clicked through the details and nearly laughed out loud when I saw the address. The lake house. My lake house. That was the moment everything snapped. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft. The property I bought, the business I built, the family I trusted, all being used behind my back, probably for months. I could see the pattern clearly now. The vacation weekends Lisa claimed were girls' trips, aligned perfectly with bank withdrawals. Every time she said she was visiting her sister, they'd been renting out the lake house to other couples for weekend getaways. The payments went to their company. My mortgage, my maintenance, my investment, their profit. I sat there staring at the screen, half numb. It wasn't even the money that hurt the most. It was the way they'd done it quietly, confidently, like I'd never notice. Like I was invisible. I opened my messages again. Lisa had texted 3 more times overnight. Mike, please answer. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I'm sorry, okay? I'll explain everything when you come home. That last one got me. When you come home. As if I still had one. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the property management portal I'd set up when I first bought the lake house. My name was still listed as the owner, but there was a new sub-user account added 2 months ago, Chris L. It had full access. He'd been using my credentials to schedule guests, manage bookings, even send receipts. I checked the payout logs. Nearly $48,000 over 9 months, split between his and Lisa's shared business account. That's when my hands started shaking. I hadn't realized I was gripping the coffee mug until it cracked slightly in my palm. I set it down before it shattered. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the anger rise and fall like a wave. The more I thought about it, the more the puzzle pieces fell into place. Lisa's sudden interest in travel content. Chris bragging about a side hustle he couldn't talk about yet. The new car my parents said he earned last spring. They weren't just humiliating me for fun. They'd been building something together. Behind my back. Using my money, my property, my trust. It took me a while to process it all. Part of me still didn't want to believe it. So, I called a friend, an old business partner named Daniel. He was one of the few people I trusted. "Hey," I said when he picked up, trying to sound steady. "You got a minute?" "Mike? Dude, where have you been? Everyone's talking about that lake thing." "I know," I said quietly. "Listen, I need your help. Can you run a quick background check for me? Business registry, LLC filings. Look for a company called Blue Haven Rentals." He hesitated. "That your side project?" "Not exactly," I said. 10 minutes later, he called back. "Yeah, I found it. Registered last August. Owner, Chris L. Co-signer, Lisa M. You want me to keep digging?" "No," I said, voice flat. "That's enough." "Mike, what's going on?" I let out a long breath. Let's just say I finally see things clearly. After hanging up, I sat staring at the wall for a long time. The betrayal wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated. And the worst part was, everyone around them probably knew. My parents, our friends, maybe even the kids, at least partly. Because how could something that big stay secret otherwise? That evening, I went for a walk down the snowy path behind the cabin. The air burned my lungs, but it helped clear my head. The mountains around me were quiet, indifferent. It felt grounding. Somewhere between those steps, I realized I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was calculating. When I got back, I found another voicemail, this time from my mother again, her voice trembling. "Michael, please call us. Your brother made a mistake, but family shouldn't fight like this. He's willing to apologize, okay? He feels awful." I hit replay, just to make sure I heard that right. Willing to apologize. Like that fixed anything. Like stealing from me and parading around with my wife could be fixed with a few sorries. Then came another voicemail, Chris this time. "Mike, look man, I didn't mean for things to get this messy. You know me. I had an opportunity, and Lisa said you'd never use that house anyway. It was supposed to be something small. Then the business started taking off, and," he paused, sighing. "Just call me, okay? We can work this out like adults." I almost laughed. Like adults. That night, I poured myself a drink and opened the family group chat for the first time since the birthday. Hundreds of unread messages. Scrolling through them was like peeling off layers of rot. My parents defending Chris. My wife claiming it was just business. My brother joking about how it's not like you even go there. My kids' names sprinkled in here and there. Mostly them trying to change the subject or calm everyone down. And then I found the one that broke me completely. It was from Lisa, 3 days before my birthday. She'd sent it to Chris privately, but accidentally dropped it in the family thread before deleting it. Someone, probably my son, had screenshotted it and uploaded it to Imager. The message read, "Don't worry, he'll get over it. He always does. He's too passive to do anything anyway." Too passive. That was how she saw me. That was how they all saw me. I stared at that line until my eyes blurred. I'd spent my entire life avoiding conflict, convincing myself that peace was more important than pride. But peace built on humiliation isn't peace. It's slow suffocation. Around midnight, I drove into town and found a small 24-hour print shop. The guy behind the counter barely looked up when I walked in. I handed him a flash drive. "Can you print and bind everything on this?" I asked. He scrolled through the files. "This is like 60 pages. "That's fine." When he handed me the finished packet, I felt oddly calm. Inside were screenshots, bank records, property documents, and every piece of proof I needed. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I'd keep it close. When I returned to the cabin, I opened my phone again. There were dozens more messages. One stood out, a text from my father. "Your mother's heart can't take this stress. Be the bigger man and let it go." That line did something to me. Be the bigger man. The phrase I'd heard my entire life whenever Chris messed up and I was expected to forgive him. When he wrecked my car at 19, I was told to be the bigger man. When he flirted with Lisa at our engagement party, same thing. When he borrowed thousands and never repaid it again, I finally realized that in our family, being the bigger man meant be the doormat. So, I decided to stop being either. The next day, I drove back home. I didn't tell anyone. I parked down the street, watching my own house from a distance. Chris's car was in the driveway. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it still twisted something deep inside my chest. I sat there for a long time, staring at the lights glowing through the curtains. At one point, I saw silhouettes pass by, Lisa and Chris, laughing. I don't know how long I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, heartbeat pounding in my ears. Eventually, I got out, walked to the front door, and unlocked it with my key. The laughter stopped. Lisa's voice broke the silence first. "Mike." I stepped inside. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's me." Chris froze mid-movement near the kitchen island, holding a glass of wine. Lisa stood beside him, pale, eyes wide. Neither of them spoke. I looked at both of them and then down at the table. There was an open laptop showing the booking page for Blue Haven Rentals. My house. My name. Their company. And right then, looking at them, the people who'd gutted my trust for their convenience, something inside me changed forever. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to destroy the peace they'd built on my silence. And that was the moment everything turned. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. Lisa's eyes flicked from me to Chris, like she was waiting for him to say something first. Chris shifted, putting his glass down slowly, trying to act casual, but his jaw tightened when he saw I wasn't moving. "Mike," he finally said, voice a little shaky. "Hey man, listen." "Don't," I said quietly. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Don't say a word." Lisa took a step forward. "We were going to tell you," she started, her tone trembling with that fake softness I'd heard 100 times before. "It just got complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, letting the word hang. "You mean the part where you and my brother started a business with my money? Or the part where you decided to celebrate my birthday without me on my own property?" Chris rubbed the back of his neck, trying to force a smile. "It's not like that, man. You're twisting it. The business was supposed to be for the family. You weren't around much lately, so we—" I cut him off with a quiet laugh. "For the family. That's rich." Lisa's eyes started to glisten, like she was preparing to cry her way out of it. "Please, Mike, I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said softly. "I thought you'd be happy once we explained everything." "Happy?" I asked, stepping closer. "You thought I'd be happy that my wife and my brother were running a business together behind my back, using my property, taking my money?" She looked down, voice dropping to a whisper. "I just wanted to feel like I was part of something." That line hit me harder than I expected, because for years I had said the same thing, quietly, to myself, while she and my family made me feel like an outsider. The irony almost made me laugh. But I didn't. I just turned and walked toward the living room. The same room we decorated together years ago when we bought this house. The same couch where I'd fallen asleep after long days at work, where she'd sit scrolling on her phone instead of talking to me. I sat down, hands clasped, staring at the wall. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't move. After a long silence, Lisa finally said, "Can we talk about this like adults?" I looked up at her. "Adults don't do what you did." Her lips pressed together. "It was a mistake." Chris stepped forward, crossing his arms. "Come on, man, stop acting like we committed a crime. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just business." "Then why hide it?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Right," I said quietly. "Because you knew exactly what it was." I stood up, walked past both of them, and headed upstairs. I could hear Lisa following me, her voice shaking. "Mike, please, where are you going?" "To pack." "For what?" I stopped in the hallway, turned to look at her. "For whatever's next." Her face went pale. "You're leaving?" I didn't answer. I went into the bedroom, our bedroom, and opened the closet. Half her clothes were gone, drawers half empty. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. The sight of that empty space made everything sink in deeper than any argument could. She'd already been halfway out the door long before I walked in tonight. She appeared in the doorway, eyes red. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered. "It was just supposed to be fun." Then Chris kept saying it was working, and, "Save it." I said, zipping up a suitcase. You've had plenty of time to explain. You just never thought I'd show up. She stepped forward like she wanted to stop me, but then froze. Her voice softened. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said truthfully. But whatever it is, it won't involve you. I brushed past her and walked downstairs. Chris was still standing by the kitchen island, scrolling on his phone, pretending to stay calm. You can't just leave, man, he said. Think about your kids. That stopped me. I turned slowly. Don't you dare bring them into this. He shrugged, trying to sound casual. They're still family. You walking out like this, it's not going to look good. Something about the smugness in his tone nearly made me lose it. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up the stack of documents I'd printed in Denver, the proof of every withdrawal, every booking, every lie. I dropped it on the counter in front of him. He looked down, frowned. What's this? Your business plan? I said coldly. Read it before you dig yourself any deeper. He flipped through the first few pages, and his expression changed instantly. The color drained from his face. Where did you get this? From the same place you got my money, I said. Lisa came down the stairs behind me, her voice trembling. Mike, please don't do this. You don't need to ruin everything. I turned, eyes meeting hers. You already did. Then I left. It was almost midnight by the time I got in the car. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay there another second. I drove aimlessly through the city, streetlights blurring past, radio off, thoughts spinning. I ended up at a cheap roadside motel outside town. Checked in under a fake name. When the front desk clerk asked, business or pleasure? I just said, neither. That night was the lowest I've ever felt. Not angry, just hollow. I laid on that rough motel bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint buzz of the neon sign outside. I thought about everything, my marriage, my kids, my parents, the years I'd given to a family that never once stood up for me. It's strange how fast love can turn into clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't even try to sleep. I just started making lists, something to give shape to the chaos in my head. One column for assets, one for debts, one for people I could trust, and one for everything they'd taken. By dawn, I had a plan. Not revenge yet, not even close. Just survival. Step 1, secure what was still mine. Step 2, prepare for the fallout. Step 3, make sure they couldn't touch me again. I drove to my office first. The building was dark, quiet. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started changing passwords, business accounts, bank logins, property management portals. Every trace of shared access was deleted or revoked. Lisa's name disappeared from everything she'd once controlled. Then I called my lawyer, a quiet, methodical man named Harris who'd helped me set up my business years ago. Mike, he said after I explained, this isn't just emotional betrayal. It's financial misconduct. You have grounds for legal action. I'm not ready for that, I said. Not yet. I just need to make sure they can't take another cent. Understood, he said. We can freeze the accounts. I'll draft the paperwork. By noon, I was sitting in a coffee shop, sipping black coffee while watching the freeze confirmations roll in. Each notification felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Then my phone buzzed again, Lisa. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Where are you? She asked, voice trembling. Why? Because the bank called, she said. They said the accounts are locked. What are you doing? Cleaning up, I said. You made a mess. Her tone shifted from panic to anger. You can't just freeze everything. What about the kids? The bills? The mortgage? I let her words hang before saying, the mortgage is paid. The kids will be fine. As for you, well, you have Chris. She went quiet for a moment. Then, you're punishing me. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. I hung up before she could respond. That evening, I parked outside the school just to see my kids from a distance. They were walking out with backpacks, laughing with friends. I stayed in the car, watching quietly. My daughter looked around once, like she sensed something, but she didn't see me. I didn't want her to. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face them. Not until I figured out how to explain that the people they loved most had torn our family apart. Back at the motel, I sat in the dark, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Family trips, birthdays, holidays. Every smile now felt like a lie I'd believed too easily. The longer I looked, the more a strange calm began to replace the sadness. It wasn't acceptance, it was something colder. Clarity, maybe. I realized something important that night. I had already lost everything that mattered. There was nothing left they could take from me. And once you reach that point, you stop being afraid. So I stopped hiding. The next morning, I checked out of the motel, drove to the lake house, and unlocked the door. The air inside still smelled faintly like wine and cheap perfume. I opened the curtains, let the light flood in, and sat down at the same table they'd used for their celebration. For hours, I sat in silence, replaying everything in my mind. Every insult, every smirk, every be the bigger man. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore, not yet. I was thinking about dignity, about what it would mean to finally walk away and let them live with the emptiness they created. By the time the sun set, I knew I couldn't go back. Not to the house, not to Lisa, not to the version of myself who kept forgiving everyone just to keep the peace. That man was gone, but something new was forming in his place. Someone patient, deliberate, unafraid to burn bridges if that's what it took to rebuild a better life. And somewhere deep down, I could already feel it, the calm before something much, much bigger. The first few weeks after walking away were quiet, almost eerily so. I rented a small apartment in the city, a place with nothing sentimental attached to it. No framed photos, no familiar furniture, no echoes of arguments that once lived in the walls. Just a bed, a desk, and a view of the skyline. It wasn't much, but it was mine. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd spent so long defining my worth through other people, my family, my wife, even my brother, that silence felt unnatural. Every morning, I'd wake up expecting to hear Lisa clattering dishes downstairs or my kids arguing over cereal. Instead, I got the distant hum of traffic and my own heartbeat. It was jarring, but freeing. Work was the only thing I still had structure in. I threw myself into it like a man rebuilding from ashes. The business, my construction firm, had been limping along while I was distracted trying to hold my marriage together. Once I focused again, I realized how much potential it still had. I met with clients personally. I expanded into renovation projects. Within a few months, we landed a deal restoring a string of old lakefront cabins, ironic in a way. While Chris and Lisa had turned my property into their playground, I was quietly turning half the county's lakeshore into profit. The work helped. It gave me something to build again, something that wasn't poisoned by betrayal. But rebuilding your life isn't just about money. It's about rediscovering what you were before people convinced you to shrink. I started running in the mornings, reading again, even cooking, badly at first, but it felt good to make something just for myself. I hadn't realized how long I'd gone without choosing for me. There were moments of weakness, of course. Nights when I'd scroll through photos of my kids and wonder if they missed me. Times when I'd almost pick up the phone to call Lisa just to hear her voice, even though I knew she'd only twist it into guilt. But every time I came close, I reminded myself, she'd already made her choice. And mine was to rise. The funny thing about stepping away from toxicity is that people notice. Some out of curiosity, some out of regret. Word spread quickly in our small circle that I'd cut ties. Some said I'd lost it. Others whispered I was up to something. I didn't correct them. Let them wonder. What I didn't expect was how fast the tide would turn once people saw me thriving. Old clients reached out, saying they'd always preferred working with me, but didn't want to get between family. Former friends who'd laughed at those birthday posts started texting again, saying things like, "Man, I didn't realize it was that bad." Hypocrisy doesn't surprise you once you've seen what people will do for convenience. Still, I kept my circle small. Daniel, the friend who'd helped me confirm the LLC scam, became my right-hand man. We met every Friday morning at a diner downtown to strategize. One day, as I sipped my coffee, he slid a folder across the table. "You're not going to believe this," he said. Inside were financial updates, the kind of detailed records that only someone with access could find. The Blue Haven Rentals account was struggling. After I froze the joint funds, Chris had tried to reopen it under a new name, but without my property and without Lisa's charm to lure investors, it tanked. "They're bleeding money," Daniel said, smirking. "Looks like karma works fast." I didn't smile. "Karma's not done yet," I said quietly. It wasn't about revenge, not then, it was about control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was directing. Meanwhile, I made sure everything I owned was secured. Every document was in my name alone. Every account protected. I transferred the lake house into an LLC solely under me, making it legally untouchable without my consent. Then I took it a step further. I rebranded it. not as a rental, but as a retreat. I hired a small management team and converted it into a private getaway for executives and clients. What once was their playground became my business asset, clean, legitimate, and profitable. Within months, bookings doubled what they ever made through their shady side hustle. I didn't announce it. I didn't post it online. But I made sure word got around subtly. A mention here, a client tag there. The kind of success that trickles through whispers. That's when the calls started again. First from Mom, then Chris, then Lisa, none of which I answered. It wasn't until I got a call from my lawyer that I realized they were getting desperate. "They've filed for mediation," Harris said. "They're claiming you're withholding shared assets." I almost laughed. "Shared assets? She stole from me." He chuckled. "I know. But legally, this is their last move before they crumble. Want me to shut it down?" "Not yet," I said. "Let them talk." I started attending the meetings calmly, dressed sharp, composed, the opposite of the broken man they expected. Lisa looked shocked the first time she saw me. She tried to smile, like she could soften the memory of what she'd done. Chris looked uncomfortable, fidgeting the entire session. The mediator asked if we could find common ground. I said, "Sure, as long as that ground doesn't include theft, infidelity, or fraud." Lisa winced. Chris muttered something under his breath, and I leaned forward slightly. "What was that, Chris?" He didn't answer. That was the moment I realized they weren't just ashamed, they were scared, because they saw what I'd become without them. After the meeting, I stepped outside, breathing in the cold air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel overlooked. I felt untouchable. It's strange, the power you gain when you stop begging to be understood. Over the next few months, everything grew faster than I could have imagined. My business expanded into neighboring states. I hired more staff. Revenue tripled. I was traveling often, networking with people who saw my work, not my family reputation, as my worth. I even started mentoring younger contractors, helping them avoid the mistakes I'd made. It felt good to give back, to be respected for something real. But even as life improved, a quiet part of me stayed anchored to the pain that started it all. Not out of bitterness, but purpose. I wasn't done. There were still loose ends, and I wanted to tie them on my terms. One evening, I returned to my apartment after a long week and found an envelope slid under my door. No name, just my address. Inside was a photo, me standing outside the lake house, talking to a group of clients. On the back, written in Lisa's handwriting, "We need to talk. For the kids." I set it on the counter, staring at it for a long time. There was a time I would have dropped everything, rushed to her, tried to fix things. Not anymore. That night, I poured myself a drink and stared out the window at the city lights. For the first time in my life, I felt what real power tasted like: quiet, patient, earned. The kind that doesn't need to shout. But something inside me still stirred. Not revenge, not yet. Just the cold awareness that they hadn't learned anything. Not Chris. Not Lisa. Not my parents who still defended them. They thought I'd moved on. That my silence meant forgiveness. What they didn't realize was that I was only getting started. Because you can't truly rebuild until you tear down what was built on lies. And soon, they were going to see just how much stronger I'd become without them. It started small, quiet, methodical, and almost invisible. I wasn't interested in shouting my revenge from rooftops or making dramatic scenes. I wanted precision. I wanted permanence. I began with what mattered most to them: reputation and comfort. Chris always thrived on appearances. The funny, successful brother. The guy who could talk his way through any situation. He'd built his life on networking and charm, always one phone call away from his next big deal. So I started there. Through Harris, my lawyer, I initiated a formal complaint about Blue Haven rentals, not as a personal grievance, but as a professional report. Fraudulent ownership claims, tax misreporting, misuse of property, all verifiable, all documented. I submitted every file I'd collected, complete with the forged digital signatures Lisa had used on the property forms. It took less than 2 weeks for the audit to begin. Chris's side business went from a vanity project to a liability overnight. His accounts were frozen, his clients notified, and his business license suspended pending investigation. The best part? I never had to say a word. The system did it for me. A few days later, I got a call from Daniel. "You'll want to see this," he said, sending me a link. It was a local news article: luxury rental owner under investigation for fraud allegations. There was Chris's photo, smiling awkwardly beside a blurred-out image of the lake house. I didn't smile. I just took a long sip of coffee and whispered, "One down." Lisa was trickier. She thrived on control, on being the one who knew more, who had the upper hand emotionally. But people like her have a weakness. They need an audience. So, I used that. I reached out to a mutual friend of ours, Karen, the kind of woman who loved to gossip but hated being caught in the middle. I told her, casually, that I was worried about Lisa's situation. I made sure to sound concerned, not vindictive. "She's still under investigation too," I said softly. "And the bank records, well, they don't look good." By the next morning, that conversation had spread like wildfire. Suddenly, Lisa was the subject of whispers. People she'd once bragged to about her success began avoiding her. Invitations stopped coming. Her friends drifted away, not out of malice, but fear of being associated with scandal. Social exile. Slow, silent, and devastating. Within weeks, she went from throwing wine parties to deleting her social media entirely. I didn't need to see her crumble publicly. Knowing she was forced to live without her spotlight was enough. But the final step, the one I'd been planning the longest, was for my parents. For years, they'd made me feel like I was the lesser son. The one who worked too much, talked too little, never lightened up like Chris. They'd always defended him, even when he hurt me. Especially then. So I gave them a lesson in consequences they couldn't ignore. I invited them to lunch one Sunday, first contact since everything went down. They came, cautious but curious, probably assuming I was ready to make peace. Mom even brought a pie, the same kind she always baked when she wanted to smooth things over. We sat in the restaurant, a quiet, upscale place overlooking the river. I let them talk first. "Michael," Mom said, using the full name she only used when she wanted control of the conversation. "This whole thing has gone too far. Your brother is a mess, Lisa's beside herself, and the kids are confused. Can't you just let it go?" Dad nodded. "You've made your point, son. Families shouldn't destroy each other like this." I looked at them calmly. "Families shouldn't steal either." Mom sighed, setting down her fork. "You always take things so personally. Chris was just being Chris." I finished for her. And I was supposed to be the bigger man again, right? Silence. I leaned back, letting the weight of the moment hang. Then I pulled an envelope from my jacket and slid it across the table. "Since you both like being involved in your children's successes, I thought you should see the latest paperwork." Dad frowned, opening it. His eyes widened. "This is a deed." "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "To the lake house. I renamed it. It's now a private retreat, part of my new hospitality division. I own it outright. Bookings are full through next summer." Mom blinked, confused. You kept it?" "Oh, I didn't just keep it," I said. "I turned it into something profitable. Something clean. Every cent they tried to steal, I made back twice over." They looked stunned. I continued, voice calm but sharp. "So, from now on, if you want to visit family, you'll have to book a stay at market rates. Guests only." Mom's face went pale. "You can't be serious." "I'm done being the family charity," I said. "I built everything myself. I lost it because I trusted the wrong people. And I rebuilt it because I stopped listening to the ones who said family first while they drained me dry." Dad's jaw tightened. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm freeing myself." I stood up, left enough cash to cover their meals, and walked out. They didn't follow. That night, I drove back to the lake house for the first time in months. It was quiet now, professional, organized, almost unrecognizable. The staff greeted me politely, unaware of the history buried in those walls. I walked to the dock and stood there as the water shimmered under the fading sunset. I thought about everything: the humiliation, the silence, the rebuilding. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about creation. Building something so unshakable that it makes the people who broke you realize they never had power at all. As I stood there, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I answered, half expecting more noise. "Mike." It was Chris. His voice was strained, quieter than I'd ever heard it. They're taking everything, man. The audit's destroying me. I don't know what to do." I listened. The old me might have felt pity, might have tried to help. But I just said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." He tried to say something else, but I hung up. The wind picked up, brushing against the water. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly at peace. And yet, deep down, I knew this story wasn't done. Because the people who break others so easily never truly accept defeat, not until they lose something they can't get back. And for them, that was coming next. 3 months passed before the last pieces fell into place. The storm I'd quietly started had finished its course, and all that was left was silence, the kind that comes after something heavy collapses. The audit on Chris's company turned into a full-blown investigation. Fraud, tax evasion, misuse of funds, the works. Turns out, when you try to run a business using money that isn't yours, the law gets interested very quickly. He'd used false income statements to secure a line of credit, then defaulted once the rental payments stopped. Every document tied back to Blue Haven Rentals, and through that, to him. When the news broke that charges were being filed, it wasn't a small headline this time. It made local TV. Local entrepreneur under investigation for property fraud. The image they used was of Chris leaving the courthouse, eyes down, reporters shouting questions he couldn't answer. My parents tried to keep it quiet, of course. They said things like, "It's just paperwork, and he'll bounce back." But the truth was clear. His reputation, the only thing he'd ever cared about, was gone. As for Lisa, she wasn't charged with anything criminal, but the damage was done. Her name was listed as a participating advisor in the business records, which meant every background check for the rest of her life would flag it. She lost her job at the design firm after clients began asking uncomfortable questions. The HR department called it a breach of professional trust. I heard through a friend that she had to move into a small apartment across town. Chris didn't stick around for long. Once his assets were seized, he started blaming her for everything. They split within weeks. I wasn't surprised. Parasites can't live off each other. My kids stayed mostly with me after that. The courts sided with me during the custody review, especially once the financial evidence came out. The judge's words still echo in my mind. Stability belongs with the parent who values truth. Lisa cried in the courtroom when the decision was read. She tried to reach for my daughter's hand, but my daughter quietly pulled away and looked at me instead. That moment, that quiet, wordless act of loyalty, meant more than any victory could. Afterward, Lisa asked if we could talk privately. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to hear what she'd say now that everything was gone. She looked tired, worn out, a shadow of the woman I once knew. "I never thought you'd actually go through with all of this," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't plan it," I told her. "I just stopped protecting people who hurt me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Wasn't there another way?" "There was," I said. "You could have just loved me." She didn't say anything after that, just stood there as I walked away. My parents still call sometimes, mostly to ask if I'll help Chris get back on his feet. I don't yell, I don't argue. I just say, I hope he learns something from all this, and hang up. I've realized that the only way to win against people who feed on guilt is to stop offering it. Business continued to grow faster than I could manage. The lake house became the centerpiece of my new hospitality company, a high-end retreat for executives, couples, and even a few celebrities. The same place that once represented humiliation now stood as proof that I could turn betrayal into profit. Every time I walked the property, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was peace. Last summer, I hosted a private event there for the company's anniversary. As the evening sun dipped behind the trees, my daughter came up beside me on the dock, smiling. "Do you ever miss them?" she asked softly. I looked at the water for a long moment before answering. "Sometimes. But then I remember who I became because of what they did." She nodded quietly, as if she understood something beyond her years. Later that night, when everyone had left and the lights from the house reflected off the water, I walked out alone and sat on the edge of the dock. The same spot where I once stood feeling broken, invisible, forgotten. The air was cool. The lake was still. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I took a deep breath and said it out loud, just to hear the words in the open air. You can lose everything and still win. And with that, I stood up, turned off the last light, and left the past behind for good. I'm Mark, 32, and for most of my adult life, I played the role of the dependable son. Not the golden child. No, that title belonged to my younger sister, Lindsay, but the one who picked up the slack, the one who paid the overdue bills without being asked, The one who quietly covered the mortgage when dad got laid off and mom's temporary illness turned into 2 years of me shouldering every expense from groceries to utilities. I didn't complain. I didn't make speeches. I just helped because that's what I thought family meant: loyalty, sacrifice, showing up even when no one claps for you. I never noticed how one-sided it was until a few months ago. It was a Thursday, ordinary, like most days when something big happens and you don't know it yet. I'd just gotten home from work, still in my dress shirt, microwaving leftovers, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my cousin Amy. Just a simple, "Hey, sorry to hear about the will." That's brutal. I stared at it for a second, not understanding. What will? A second later, she sent a blurry photo of some paperwork. My dad's handwriting. My mom's signature. I scrolled through it slowly, my fingers suddenly cold. It was real. My parents had finalized their will a few weeks earlier, without telling me, and every last thing they owned, from the house I helped keep from foreclosure to the small lake cottage my grandfather built, had been left to Lindsay. My name wasn't even mentioned. Not a single word. Not even a token gesture like Mark receives the bookshelf he built as a teen. Nothing. It was like I didn't exist. At first, I told myself there had to be a mistake. Surely they just hadn't updated it. Or maybe they assumed Lindsay would share things with me. I called. No answer. I texted my mom. "Hey, can we talk for a second?" Read. No reply. That whole night, I paced my apartment. That awful photo burned into my brain. I thought of all the times I said no to hanging out with friends or buying myself something nice, just to make sure their lights stayed on. I thought of the envelopes of cash I quietly slid into their mailbox when their pride wouldn't let them ask for help directly. And now? I didn't even warrant a mention. 3 days later, I finally got my answer. Mom called while I was at work. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short, almost casual. "Hey Mark, sorry I've been busy. We were going to tell you about the will, but it just made sense to keep things simple. Lindsay's the one with a family, and she's, well, you know, stable. You're doing fine, right? Call me later." Her tone made it worse, somehow. Not cruel, just dismissive. Like it was a perfectly logical decision. Like I wasn't owed anything, not even a real explanation. That night, I sat at my desk with a notepad. I wrote down every bill I'd been paying: electricity, water, Wi-Fi, trash pickup, the Netflix account they'd long since stopped contributing to but still used. I calculated how much I'd spent over the last year alone. It came to just over $8,000, not including the random groceries or gas money. And I realized something. I wasn't just the good son. I was the unpaid caretaker, the safety net, the backup plan they never acknowledged, but always counted on. I didn't explode. I didn't send an angry text. I just stopped, quietly, deliberately. I removed my card from the utility autopay system. I canceled the streaming services. I let the overdue notices do the talking. At first, there was silence. A week passed. Then two. Then, one Monday morning, I woke up to a text from Mom. No greeting. No pleasantries. Just, "Power's about to get shut off. Did you forget to pay again?" Again. Like it was my job. Like I had dropped the ball on an assignment I was never thanked for doing in the first place. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about replying with a lecture. Something sharp and articulate. But instead, I typed one word. No, then I blocked her number. The calls didn't stop, of course. She tried using Dad's phone. Then Lindsay's. Even a couple of friends I hadn't heard from in ages suddenly remembered I existed. I ignored them all. My email filled with vague, guilt-laced messages. "You know they're struggling. This isn't you, Mark. Family doesn't turn their back." One message actually ended with, "Don't be dramatic." But none of them had seen that will. None of them had heard the way Mom said, "You're doing fine," as if success was a disqualifier for decency. As if the minute I stopped needing them, they stopped seeing me as their son and started treating me like a tool. Something useful. Something replaceable. About 2 weeks after I blocked her, I got a voicemail from Lindsay. I hadn't spoken to her much since college. She was always the favorite, always the good one, but we'd never really clicked. Her voice was cheerful at first, and then it turned odd. "Hey, Mark. So, I heard there's been a little miscommunication. Mom and Dad are kinda in a tough spot, and I figured maybe you could be a sweetheart and help out for a bit. I'm just so swamped with the kids, you know. Anyway, they really need the water turned back on. I told them you'd come around." I didn't reply. But that message, "I told them you'd come around," stayed with me. Because it wasn't a plea. It wasn't even a question. It was an assumption. That was the moment I realized how deep it ran. It wasn't just that they favored her. It was that they truly believed I existed to serve them. That no matter what they did or didn't do, I would be there. I would pick up the pieces. I would pay the bills. Because that's who I'd always been. Not a son. Not an equal. A resource. So, I decided to change that. But not with words. Not with explanations. Not with more sacrifices. No. This time, I had something better in mind. And it started with a quiet visit to the county records office. I showed up at the county records office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The kind of day where everything felt heavy, sky, air, even your own thoughts. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I didn't take the day off work. I just left during lunch with my jacket zipped high and my hands stuffed in my pockets. The place was quiet. A few retirees scanning through property documents, a young couple whispering about marriage certificates. I walked up to the front desk and asked for the clerk who handled property records. The woman behind the counter barely looked up. Purpose. Looking into a house deed. My parents, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She handed me a request form. Address. I wrote it out carefully. The house I'd helped save 3 separate times. The same one I'd mowed the lawn for in my 20s when Dad threw his back out. The one I'd painted, power washed, and winterized when they couldn't afford maintenance. The house they'd now left entirely to Lindsay. No caveat. No mention of shared ownership. No thank you. 10 minutes later, she handed me the file. Their mortgage had been refinanced twice in the last 6 years. The remaining balance wasn't massive, but it wasn't tiny either. And there it was in black and white. My name wasn't listed anywhere on the deed. Not even as a beneficiary. Just my parents, and a line stating it would pass to Lindsay upon both their deaths. I stared at that sentence for a while, then folded the file and slid it back across the counter. I didn't need a copy. I didn't need proof. I just needed clarity. On the way back to the office, I stopped at the bank. I wasn't sure what compelled me to do it right then, but something in me wanted to finish the clean break. Lindsay and I had shared an old joint account from when we briefly tried to launch a business together. She'd begged me to keep it open in case we ever gave it another shot. I'd left it with just a few $100s in it, forgotten. But when I checked the transaction history, I nearly laughed. For the last 6 months, she'd been quietly transferring that money into her personal account. Small amounts, $25 here, $40 there. As if I wouldn't notice. As if I wouldn't care. I emptied the account, closed it, and flagged the activity. Not to get her in trouble, just to send a quiet message. I'm not your safety net. Then came the real step. A conversation I had been avoiding for a long time. I called a lawyer. Not the kind of flashy, billboard-type lawyer with a grin that made your skin crawl. A quiet, middle-aged woman named Teresa who came highly recommended by a colleague. We sat in her office over cups of lukewarm coffee while I laid everything out. The will, the bills, the years of financial support with no paper trail. I'm not looking to sue them, I clarified. I just want to protect myself. Legally, financially, emotionally. She nodded slowly. There's a lot we can do. First, let's talk about boundaries. Then, about documentation. You've been acting as their financial caregiver for years. If they try to guilt you into resuming that role, you'll need clean, firm records of what you did and when you stopped. It was like she read my mind. She helped me draft a formal letter, one I never thought I'd send. It politely, professionally stated that I was no longer responsible for any bills, debts, or obligations related to my parents' property. It didn't include accusations. It didn't carry bitterness. Just facts, sealed with a notary stamp. I mailed it. Certified delivery. Signature required. 3 days later, Lindsay called me at work. I let it ring. She called again. Then Mom. Then Dad. The voicemails grew increasingly frantic. Mark, why are you doing this to us? We didn't mean anything by it. Just talk to us. Then came the one that really hit me. It was Lindsay. Her voice lower this time. Less chirpy. More desperate. Mom says they might have to sell the house. They can't afford all this, Mark. You know that. I can't take them in. I have my own kids. She paused. You were always the one who helped. You're the only one who ever really kept this family together. Please, just help them through the winter. That sentence. You were always the one who helped. Not appreciated. Not loved. Not respected. Used. That's when the shift happened. The emotional one. I wasn't angry anymore. Not like before. The betrayal had been sharp at first, but now it was dull. A splinter left in too long, slowly numbing the skin. What I felt now wasn't rage. It was a quiet resolve. A curtain falling. A voice inside me finally speaking clearly. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. The silence I gave them after that wasn't cruel. It was closure. But things didn't end there. Because a week later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting shaky, but familiar. It was from Dad. And inside was a message that changed everything. The envelope was thin. Too thin for what it carried. When I first saw it in my mailbox, plain white, no return address, just my name in trembling handwriting, I almost tossed it. Part of me assumed it was just another plea, or worse, an attempt to guilt me back into the role I'd walked away from. But something made me open it. Maybe it was the uneven way my name was written, like the pen had been clutched too tightly. Or maybe it was that eerie silence that had followed Lindsay's last voicemail, the silence that didn't feel like surrender, but strategy. Inside was a single sheet of paper, lined, torn from one of those cheap spiral notebooks Dad always had stacked near the TV. The ink had bled slightly on a few words, like it had been written slowly, with pauses. It read, "Mark, I don't expect you to forgive us. I'm not sure we deserve it. Your mother made the decision about the will. She said it was simpler to leave everything to Lindsay. She thought you wouldn't care because you have your own life. I let her do it. That was my failure. I saw the copy of the letter your lawyer sent, and I understand now what it means. What you've done for us. I don't even know how to begin thanking you. You paid for things without complaint. You never asked for recognition. You just showed up. I let that go unnoticed for too long. I also know this letter probably won't change anything. But there's something you should know. Your grandfather left something for you, and your mother never told you about it." My eyes stopped there. I reread that last line a few times before continuing. The letter continued on the back. "He left you the cabin, the one by the lake. He signed the transfer papers before he passed, but your mother said it was better to keep it in the family name until you were ready. Then when the new will was written, she told the lawyer to consolidate everything under Lindsay. I didn't object. That's on me. But the cabin wasn't hers to take. I kept a copy of the transfer. I hid it. In the attic. In the metal box behind the insulation. Do what you want with it. I don't expect to hear back. I'm sorry, Dad." I sat there in my car for almost an hour, the letter resting on my steering wheel, the engine off, the world strangely quiet around me. There was no anger this time. No rising heartbeat. Just a stillness. A clarity. It all clicked into place. The missing paperwork. The way Mom insisted we never talk about the cabin in front of other family. The time Lindsay randomly brought it up at Christmas 2 years ago. It'll be great when we can remodel the lake house after. You know, everything's settled, and I just assumed she was talking about someday far in the future. Apparently, she already thought it was hers. The metal box. The attic. The insulation. I drove straight there. The house was as unremarkable as always. A faded lawn chair sat by the porch, tilted at an angle that suggested no one had used it in weeks. The blinds were drawn, but I could see a light on in the hallway through a thin gap. I didn't knock. I still had the spare key. Of course I did. Inside, it smelled faintly like old coffee and dust. The kind of smell that lives in every childhood memory, no matter how much you try to bleach it away. No one was home. That was luck. Or maybe fate. I didn't care which. I climbed the stairs slowly, the letter still in my pocket. The attic door groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. I pulled down the ladder, climbed up, and was hit by a wave of warm, stale air. It was exactly how I remembered it, cluttered, forgotten, full of half-labeled boxes and old seasonal decorations no one bothered to throw out. The insulation was on the far side, near the chimney stack. I dug behind it, my fingers itching from the fiberglass. And there it was, a dented metal box. I yanked it out. The latch was old but not locked. Inside were a few yellowed papers, a couple of black and white photos of my grandfather in his younger years, and folded neatly the deed transfer. My name, his signature, the date. He'd signed it 3 weeks before his stroke. The cabin had been mine all along, and Mom had buried it. I didn't know what to feel in that moment. Not rage, not triumph, just numbness, a strange sense of grief. For the years I'd spent thinking I had no real place in the family legacy. For all the times I believed them when they acted like I should just be grateful to have my own life. For letting myself feel guilty for pulling away when I'd done more than any of them ever had. I took the papers, all of them, slid them into a folder I found nearby. Then I locked the attic behind me, returned the ladder, and left the house exactly as I'd found it. I didn't leave a note. That evening, I drove out to the lake. I hadn't been there in almost 10 years. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, and the porch sagged a little more, but it was still standing. Still quiet. Still mine. I stood at the edge of the water as the sun began to set, the folder tucked under my arm, and realized something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But that feeling didn't last long. Because 2 days later, Lindsay showed up at my apartment. And she was furious. She showed up just before noon on a Saturday. I had been planning to drive out to the cabin again that afternoon, start taking inventory, maybe make a list of what needed fixing before the fall, but the sharp, rapid knocks on my door cut through my morning like a blade. I knew it was her before I even looked through the peephole. Lindsay always knocked like that, like the world owed her attention right this second. I debated not answering, but something told me this was it. The confrontation I'd been waiting for, or maybe avoiding. I opened the door slowly, keeping my expression flat. She was already mid-rant. You went through mom and dad's things? No hello. No pretense. She was wearing a windbreaker and sunglasses, even though it wasn't sunny. Her jaw was clenched so tight I could practically hear her molars grinding. I didn't respond, just opened the door wider and stepped aside. She walked in like she owned the place. They woke up and the attic was a mess. Do you know how freaked out they were? And you took the box? Seriously? What? You just sneak around now, like some kind of. Sit down. That stopped her. I don't think I'd ever spoken to her like that. Calm. Cold. Not angry, just done. She blinked. Excuse me. I said sit down. To my surprise, she did. Mostly, I think, because I wasn't reacting. And Lindsay thrived on reaction. I grabbed the folder from the kitchen counter, set it down on the table between us, slid it toward her. Take a look. She opened it like she expected to find a prank inside. Her eyes scanned the deed transfer. Then again. Silence stretched out. Finally, she said, "That's not. This doesn't. It was supposed to be part of the estate." It wasn't. But Mom said. Yeah, Mom says a lot of things. Her head jerked up. I leaned forward, hands clasped. Grandpa left me the cabin. He signed it over before he passed. And Mom kept it hidden. You rewrote the will with her, didn't you? Helped her simplify it. Lindsay didn't respond. But her jaw twitched again. You thought I'd never find out. Just like with the bank account. The slow siphoning. You thought I'd never check. You didn't care about the cabin, she snapped. You never even went up there. You moved out, started your fancy job, left us all behind. You mean, I built a life. She scoffed, crossing her arms. You always act like you're some martyr. Like you did everything. Newsflash, Mark, we all struggled. You think it's easy raising 2 kids on a teacher's salary? You think it's easy being the one mom and dad lean on emotionally? I stared at her. Emotionally? Lindsay, I paid their mortgage. I covered their utility bills. I gave up vacations, holidays, time with my friends, for years, to make sure they didn't lose that house. And what did I get in return? She didn't answer. I didn't need her to. I stood up and walked over to my desk drawer, pulled out a second letter, the one from the lawyer, and laid it beside the deed. You're not getting the cabin. You're not getting a dime of anything I paid for. And Mom and Dad, they're adults. If they want help, they can ask me like adults. But that part of my life, the part where I let everyone treat me like the backup plan, is over. Lindsay opened her mouth, but I cut her off. No more. You don't get to show up and demand anything from me, especially not something that was stolen. She sat in silence for a moment, her hands fidgeting with the edge of the folder. Then, quietly, they're scared, you know. I nodded. They should be. They might lose the house. Ironic. Her voice cracked. Mark, come on. I know we weren't close growing up, but we're still family. Were we? She blinked again. Hard. Like she was actually surprised I said that. I continued, my voice even. I was good enough when you needed money. When Mom needed someone to pay the credit card. When Dad needed a ride to the hospital. But when it came time to write down names on a piece of paper that actually meant something, suddenly I didn't exist. You're overreacting. No, I said firmly. You're underestimating how much I was willing to do, and how little you all thought it was worth. She stood up, folder still in her hand. So what? You're just cutting everyone off. I already have. You're just late to the realization. The room felt heavy after that. She lingered for a second longer, as if waiting for me to say something that would soften it. Something that would let her off the hook. But I didn't. She walked out without another word. The click of the door behind her was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in weeks. A month passed. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Mom and Dad tried to refinance the house again and were denied. Something about a missed payment and an old account closure flagging the system. They were considering selling, downsizing into something smaller. They didn't reach out. I didn't offer. Lindsay sent a single text. One sentence, "You really went through with it." I didn't reply. Instead, I spent that weekend at the cabin. I'd brought tools, sandpaper, a paint roller, supplies from the hardware store. Fixing it up was slow, quiet, healing. Every squeaky floorboard I tightened, every crooked door I realigned. It all felt like reclaiming something that had been taken, not just from me, but about me. Control, self-worth, peace. I hung Grandpa's old fishing rod back on the wall above the fireplace. I found an old photo of him and me, from when I was maybe 8, holding up 2 tiny sunfish like we'd caught whales. I framed it. By the time autumn came, the leaves around the lake turned gold, and the air smelled like pine and wood smoke. I realized something. I didn't miss them. Not the way I thought I would. Because what I'd really mourned all this time wasn't my family. It was the idea of what family was supposed to be. Loyal, supportive, loving. And now? Now I was building something of my own. Not with guilt, not with obligation, but with choice. And that, I realized, was worth more than any inheritance they could have left me. I'm Corey, 34, and I have one rule in life. If I promise something to my son, I will move heaven and earth to make it happen. That rule is what pushed me through 3 months of overtime shifts, skipped lunches, and evenings coming home smelling like burnt coffee from my job at the repair shop. It was all worth it, though, because last Saturday, I finally walked through the door holding a hard case with the acoustic guitar my 12-year-old, Mason, had been talking about nonstop for almost a year. This wasn't just any guitar. It was a $2,000 Taylor, the kind of instrument you save up for, the kind of thing a kid remembers for the rest of his life. Mason's face when I opened the case made every late night worth it. He just stood there, hands frozen, like he was afraid touching it would make it disappear. Then he reached out, strummed a single chord, and looked at me like I'd just given him superpowers. That first evening, we sat together in the living room while he played simple riffs he'd learned online, his fingers still clumsy, but his grin wide enough to hurt. He was so proud he asked me if we could take the guitar to Grandma and Grandpa's on Sunday, because they should hear this. I hesitated. My side of the family is complicated. My parents have a habit of dismissing anything I do, and my older brother, Derek, has somehow turned being a dad into his entire personality. He and his wife treat their 9-year-old twins like royalty, and if you dare outshine them, even by accident, they make sure you regret it. Still, I figured maybe, just maybe, showing Mason's accomplishment would get him a little encouragement from the family. And honestly, Mason was so excited I didn't have the heart to say no. Sunday afternoon, we loaded the guitar into the car like it was made of glass. The whole drive there, Mason kept running his fingers over the case, whispering about the song he was going to play. When we got to my parents' house, the usual chaos was in full swing. Derek's twins were running around the backyard with plastic bats. My dad was filming them on his phone, and my mom was yelling from the porch about not hitting each other in the face. "Hey, everyone," I said as we walked in. "Mason's got something to show you." Derek looked up from his lawn chair and smirked. "Oh boy, what is it this time? Another science fair project?" "It's his guitar," I said, keeping my voice even. "He's been learning, and he wanted to play for you guys." My dad barely glanced at us before going back to filming the twins. My mom sighed like I'd just announced we were about to read the dictionary out loud. "Well, set it up then, I guess." We went inside, so Mason could tune up in the relative quiet of the living room. As soon as he started playing, the mood shifted. My parents sat stiffly. Derek leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, and even the twins stopped running around and stared for a minute. Mason's playing wasn't perfect, but you could hear the hours of practice behind every note. When he finished, I waited for someone, anyone, to say something nice. "Cute," my mom said finally, her tone flat. "But don't get him too excited, Corey. Kids quit hobbies all the time. You'll regret throwing money at this when he drops it next month." Mason's face fell, but before I could say anything, Derek chimed in. $2,000 for a guitar? That's insane. You know you can get one at Walmart for like $80, right? "It's not the same," I said, trying to stay calm. "This is a quality instrument. It'll last him years." Yeah, Derek said with a laugh. If the twins don't get to it first. I didn't like the way he said that. He had that grin, the one that always meant he was about to do something obnoxious just to get a rise out of me. I picked up the guitar case and put it back by the couch, partly to keep it safe, partly because I suddenly didn't trust leaving it out. The rest of the afternoon was tense. Every time Mason tried to talk about his guitar, my mom changed the subject. Derek made a joke about me, trying to raise a rock star. Even the twins seemed to sense the weird energy. They kept glancing at the case like it was some kind of forbidden treasure. By the time we were getting ready to leave, I was exhausted. Mason, though, still had that spark in his eyes. He wanted to play one more song outside before we left. I hesitated but finally agreed. We stepped onto the patio, Mason carefully holding the guitar, and that's when it happened. The first real hint that the day was about to go sideways. One of Derek's twins grabbed a plastic bat and swung it through the air, stopping just inches from the guitar's body. Mason froze. My heart jumped into my throat. "Knock it off," I snapped. But Derek just laughed from the porch. "Relax, Corey. They're just playing." Something about his tone told me this wasn't over. And I was right. What happened next would make every hair on the back of my neck stand up. I wish I could say I overreacted, that the whole bat swing inches from the guitar thing was just a fluke, but it wasn't. That little moment was the spark that lit the powder keg. I could feel it, like the air was charged. Mason's knuckles tightened on the neck of the guitar, and he looked up at me, wide-eyed, silently asking if he should put it back in the case. I almost told him yes, almost told him we were leaving right then and there. But a part of me hated the idea of Derek and his family thinking they could scare us into backing down. "Go ahead, bud," I said quietly. "Play your song." Mason nodded and started to strum. The sound floated across the patio, clear and warm, but before he could even get through the first verse, the twins started shouting over him. Not talking, full-on screaming at each other like they were competing with the guitar for volume. Then one of them picked up a wiffle ball and threw it at Mason's feet, making him stumble back a step. "Hey," I barked, my patience already fraying. Derek, still lounging on the porch steps with a beer in his hand, barely glanced over. "They're just playing, man. Chill out." "They're aiming at him while he's holding an instrument that cost me $2,000, I said sharply. "It's not a toy. Can you get them to stop?" Derek smirked. "They're kids, Corey. Lighten up. If the thing's that fragile, maybe you shouldn't bring it around." That stung, partly because of how casual he sounded. He knew how hard I'd worked for that guitar. I'd told him about the overtime shifts just a few weeks earlier when we grabbed lunch. He'd rolled his eyes back then, too, saying something about how he'd never waste that kind of money on a kid's hobby. Mason's song fizzled out. He stood there quietly, looking like he wanted to disappear, and that was what really got me. My son isn't the kind of kid to demand the spotlight, so for him to work up the courage to play in front of the family, only to get laughed over and interrupted, it felt cruel. "Come on, let's pack up," I said finally. But Mason didn't move. "Dad," he whispered, "can I just finish it?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, go ahead." This time, he tried again, but he didn't get halfway through before my mom called from the kitchen window. "Corey, don't let him hog everyone's attention. The twins want to do their skit." Their skit. The thing they force everyone to watch at every family gathering. Usually some combination of TikTok dances and half-remembered movie quotes that we all have to clap for like it's Broadway. "He's almost done." I called back. "Well, hurry it up," she said, like we were somehow inconveniencing them by existing. Mason's shoulders drooped. I could see him debating whether to keep going or just give up. He played the last few chords faster than usual and quietly put the guitar back in its case. I knelt next to him. "Hey, you were great." But he didn't answer, just nodded and sat down on the patio steps while Derek gathered everyone around for the twins' big performance. The skit went on for 10 minutes, during which Derek made sure to film every second on his phone, cheering loudly and occasionally glancing at me with that smug grin, like he was daring me to say something. When it ended, my parents clapped and hooped like they'd just witnessed an Oscar-winning performance. "See, Corey," my dad said. "This is the kind of thing we love to see. The kids having fun together." I bit back a sarcastic reply. "Fun together. Right." We were about to head out when my mom suddenly said, "Oh, leave the guitar here. The twins might like to try it." My head snapped around. "Absolutely not." She frowned. "Why not? Sharing teaches kids to be generous. It's not a toy. I said firmly. And Mason's still learning to take care of it. He just got it yesterday. Derek chuckled under his breath. Relax, dude. They're not going to break it. Let them hold it for a minute. Not happening. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Instead, my mom muttered something about me being overly dramatic, and Derek smirked like I'd just given him a new way to get under my skin. We left soon after, but the tension didn't end there. Over the next week, I got 3 separate texts from Derek with funny memes about helicopter parents. One of them showed a kid in bubble wrap holding a guitar. Another was a photo of a broken guitar with the caption, "Relax, it's just wood." I ignored them, hoping he'd get bored, but by the following weekend, he was still at it. This time, he called me while I was working on a carburetor and said, "Hey, we're having everyone over on Sunday. Bring Mason and his precious baby guitar. Maybe we can finally teach him how to loosen up." Something in his voice told me it wasn't just a joke. There was a challenge in it, like he was daring me to show up. "Yeah, we'll be there," I said after a pause. I wasn't going to let him think he'd scared us off. Mason was excited again, but I noticed he was quieter than usual when he packed up the guitar that morning. When I asked if he was nervous, he just shrugged. When we got there, the vibe was off from the start. My parents were already outside with lawn chairs set up, and Derek had that grin on his face, the one that made my stomach tighten. The twins were standing by the shed with their plastic bats again, whispering to each other and giggling. "Look who finally made it," Derek said as we walked up. "You ready for a real concert?" I didn't answer, just took the case inside and had Mason tune up in the kitchen. This time, when he stepped out to play, the twins were already on the grass, pretending to be baseball players, taking big practice swings with their bats. My dad actually started filming again, pointing his phone at the twins and chuckling. "Look at these two. Future sluggers." Mason hesitated, glancing at me nervously. "It's okay," I told him, even though every instinct I had was screaming that it wasn't. He started to play. The twins crept closer. Derek didn't stop them. My mom didn't stop them. And then, just as Mason hit the chorus, one of them swung his bat again, not at the air this time, but at the guitar. The sound it made, the hollow crack of the bat hitting the wood, echoed through the yard. And that was the moment everything changed. I froze. Mason gasped and stumbled back, clutching the neck of the guitar, but the damage was already done, a long, ugly dent carved into the wood. My parents burst out laughing. Derek actually doubled over, holding his stomach. "Oh man," he said between wheezes. "You should have seen your face." I could feel something inside me snap. And that's when my sister walked out onto the patio, looked at the guitar, and smirked. "Guess he'll learn about real life now." I looked at Mason. His eyes were shining with tears, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. What I did next made everyone go silent. For a few long seconds, no one said anything. The yard was silent except for Mason's shaky breathing and the faint hum of the cicadas. I crouched down and took the guitar from him as gently as I could, running my hand over the fresh dent in the wood. It wasn't just a scratch. It had cracked the finish and left a deep mark. I knew right away this was going to cost a lot to repair, and even then, it would never look the same. "All right," I said quietly, standing up. My voice was calm, too calm. "We're done here." I turned to go, but Derek stepped in front of me, grinning like this was all still a joke. "Whoa, come on, man. Don't be such a buzzkill. It's just a guitar." "It's not just a guitar," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "It's Mason's guitar, and you just let your kids use it for batting practice." He shrugged. "Accidents happen." "That wasn't an accident." Derek's grin widened. "What? You think I told them to hit it? Maybe if you didn't baby him so much, he'd toughen up a little." I stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. My mom chimed in from her lawn chair. "Corey, you really are overreacting. It's a good lesson for him. The world doesn't bend over backwards for your kid." Mason's lip trembled, and he looked at me like he was waiting for me to defend him. That was the moment the emotional weight of it all hit me. This wasn't just about a guitar. This was about respect. About the way my family had been treating me and my son for years. "I'm taking him home," I said, pushing past Derek. But then Derek said something that made me stop in my tracks. "Fine, take your kid home, but the guitar stays." I froze. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," he said, stepping closer, that smug look plastered on his face. "You brought it here. The twins want to play with it. Leave it." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're insane if you think I'm leaving this here after what just happened. You're not taking it anywhere, Derek said, suddenly serious. He reached out and put his hand on the case. You think you're better than everyone, buying your kid a fancy guitar like you're some kind of hero. Maybe it's time you learned to share. I pulled the case closer to me. Let go. Or what? He said, smirking. You gonna hit me? That was the moment I saw it, the phone in my dad's hand. He wasn't just filming the twins anymore. He had the camera pointed at us, recording. And then I realized he'd been filming this whole time. Mason crying, the bat hitting the guitar, Derek taunting me. You're recording this? I said, my voice low. My dad didn't even blink. Of course. This is good stuff. Maybe we'll send it to America's funniest home videos. Get a laugh out of it. That hit me harder than Derek's words. My own father, watching his grandson cry, thought this was entertainment. You think this is funny? I said. He shrugged. You're the one making it dramatic. Mason looked up at me, his face pale. Dad, can we please just go? I gripped the case so tightly my knuckles turned white. We're leaving, I said again. But Derek wasn't done. Not until you apologize, he said, stepping right into my space. Apologize, I repeated, incredulous. For overreacting, he said with a smirk. For storming around like some big shot. You scared the kids. I looked over at the twins. They weren't scared. They were laughing, whispering to each other like this was the best entertainment they'd had all summer. No, I said flatly. Derek raised his eyebrows. No. I turned to Mason. Get in the car. He hesitated for a split second before hurrying toward the driveway. Derek made a move like he was going to block me again, but this time I didn't stop. I walked right past him, shouldered open the gate, and headed for the car. That should have been the end of it, but as I was loading the guitar into the trunk, I heard Derek's voice behind me. You know what? He said loudly enough for the whole yard to hear. Maybe we should just keep it until you can pay us back for the damage. I froze. Excuse me. You heard me, he said. Your kid dented it with his own carelessness. My twins shouldn't have to take the blame. So either leave it here, or I'll tell Mom and Dad to make sure you don't get invited back until you pay for it. I stared at him, stunned. He was actually trying to flip the blame on Mason. That's not how this works, I said slowly. Sure it is, Derek said, smirking. You think you're always right, but this is our house, our rules. You want to come here, you follow them. Otherwise, stay gone. I looked at my parents, expecting at least one of them to say something, to tell Derek he was going too far. But they just sat there, silent, like they agreed with him. My mom even nodded once, as if to say, he's right. That was the breaking point for me. All the times they had dismissed me, all the ways they'd favored Derek over me, all the snide comments about Mason, it all came crashing down at once. Fine, I said finally, my voice like ice. We're gone. And then I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw Derek pick up his phone and start filming again, laughing like this was the best joke of his life. That image burned into my mind. I didn't just feel hurt anymore. I felt betrayed. Not just by Derek, but by my entire family. They had made it clear where we stood, and for the first time, I believed them. That night, Mason didn't come out of his room for hours. When he finally did, he asked me if he'd done something wrong. I knelt down, looked him in the eye, and said, no, you did everything right. They were the ones who were wrong. But inside, I was already thinking, plotting, because this wasn't over, not by a long shot. And the very next morning, I got a message from Derek that nearly made my blood boil. It was a video, the one my dad had filmed, posted online, with the caption, "When your brother thinks his kid is a rock star." The comments were full of laughing emojis. And that was when I decided I was done playing nice. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over in my head, like a movie I couldn't turn off. The sound of the bat hitting the guitar, Derek's smug grin, my parents laughing, my sister's cruel little smirk, it all looped in my mind until the anger stopped burning hot and turned into something heavier, colder. The video was what really broke me. I watched it once, just once, because I had to see what Mason had seen. The clip was 30 seconds long, just enough to catch the bat swinging into the guitar, Mason gasping, me stepping forward, and then you could hear my dad laughing so hard he wheezed. Derek had added some ridiculous sound effect over the impact, like a cartoon bonk, and slowed it down for comic effect. Mason's face was clearly visible in the frame, his eyes wide, about to cry, and my family thought that was funny enough to share. I felt sick. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but instead I just sat there, scrolling through the comments. People who didn't even know us were laughing, making jokes about spoiled kids and expensive toys, saying things like, "Bet the dad cried more than the kid." I hated that they were half right. I did feel like crying. Not because of the guitar, but because of what this meant for Mason. When I checked on him the next morning, he was sitting at his desk staring at the wall, the guitar case unopened beside him. "Want to play a little before school?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "You sure? It might make you feel better." He didn't even look at me. What's the point? They'll just laugh again. That hit me harder than anything Derek had said. Mason had never been a loud, outgoing kid, but he'd always had this spark, a quiet confidence when he was doing something he loved. And now, because of one afternoon and one stupid video, that spark was gone. The next few days were the longest of my life. I kept getting notifications because Derek had tagged me in the video, like he wanted me to see how many people were laughing. My parents didn't reach out once, not to check on Mason, not to apologize, not even to pretend to care. My sister sent me a single text. "You really embarrassed yourself. Maybe try being less sensitive next time." I didn't reply. At work, I was distracted. I'd go through the motions of fixing a carburetor or changing oil, but my head wasn't there. Every time I looked down at my hands, I saw them holding that cracked guitar case. Every time I heard laughter in the shop, I heard my parents' voices overlapping with Derek's. The worst part was the guilt. I kept asking myself if I'd made a mistake bringing Mason over in the first place. I knew how my family was, knew how they treated me, and yet I had still thought, foolishly, that this time would be different, that they would see Mason's hard work and support him. One night, Mason came out of his room and sat down at the kitchen table. "Dad," he said quietly. "Yeah. Can we sell the guitar?" I stared at him, stunned. "Why would we do that?" "Because I don't want it anymore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I look at it, I think about what happened. I think about them laughing." I felt my throat tighten. "Mason, this guitar is yours. You worked hard for it. You practiced for months. You love music." "Not anymore," he said. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the kitchen staring at the case for a long time. I couldn't sell it. I couldn't just erase what we'd been through. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that Mason was hurting, not just because of the dent, but because of what it represented. I realized then that I couldn't fix this the way I'd fixed everything else, by shrugging it off, by pretending it didn't bother me. That's what I'd done my whole life with my family. Every time Derek mocked me, every time my parents dismissed me, every time they favored him over me, I swallowed it. And all that had done was teach them that they could keep doing it. This was different. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my son. For the next week, I kept my head down. I didn't respond to Derek's texts, even though he sent more of them. Photos of the twins holding plastic bats, captions like, "Ready for round 2. He thought he'd gotten to me, and maybe he had, but not in the way he expected. I started making calls. At first, it was just about getting the guitar repaired. I contacted the music store where I bought it, asked about the cost of refinishing and fixing the dent. They told me it would be pricey, but it could be done. I almost scheduled the repair right then, but something stopped me. What was the point of fixing the guitar if Mason wasn't going to touch it again? That's when the planning started, quietly, slowly, piece by piece. I didn't tell Mason at first. He needed time to process what had happened, and I didn't want him to feel like I was pushing him to get over it. Instead, I focused on gathering information. I asked a friend who was a lawyer about whether posting videos of someone's child without consent could be taken down. I started saving screenshots of the comments under Derek's video, documenting everything. At night, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, digging through old memories, not just recent ones, but years back. Times my parents had undermined me, times Derek had taken things from me, times they'd made me feel small in front of Mason. I wrote them all down, one by one, until I had pages of incidents staring back at me. It wasn't about revenge yet, not exactly. At this stage, it was about clarity, about finally seeing my family for who they were instead of who I wished they could be. And as the list grew longer, something in me shifted. I stopped waiting for them to apologize. I stopped hoping they would call. And I stopped feeling guilty for wanting to protect my son. By the end of the second week, I knew what I had to do. I didn't tell Mason, not yet, but I started making plans for the next family gathering. Derek's birthday party was coming up, and I knew everyone would be there. If they wanted to put on a show, fine. I'd give them a show they wouldn't forget. Because they had taken something from Mason, not just a guitar, but his sense of safety, his joy, and I wasn't about to let that stand. But before I could act, something happened that pushed me over the edge. A new video popped up on Derek's page. This time, it wasn't just the bat hitting the guitar. It was edited together with clips of Mason tuning it, clips of him playing in the living room the first time, even clips from months ago when we'd been over and he'd been practicing quietly in the corner. And over the entire thing, Derek had added mocking commentary, laughing and saying things like, "Rockstar in training, somebody get this kid a record deal." He'd been recording Mason for months without me knowing. That was the final straw. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt ready. And as I closed my laptop that night, a plan started to form. One that would make sure my family finally understood that this time, they'd gone too far. The morning after I saw that second video, something in me clicked. It was like I had been standing in a dark room for years, and someone finally turned the lights on. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. That cold, heavy feeling in my chest turned into determination. I started with Mason. We sat at the kitchen table over breakfast, and I told him, "I'm getting that video taken down." His head snapped up. "You can do that." "Maybe not right away," I said. "But I promise you, we're not letting them turn you into a joke." He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Will we have to see them again?" That was the first time I said it out loud. "Not unless we want to." Something about those words seemed to ease the tension in his shoulders. He still didn't open the guitar case that day, but for the first time since that awful weekend, he sat with me on the couch and watched a video of one of his favorite guitarists. Baby steps, I told myself. Meanwhile, I started putting pieces in place. I called my friend Lyle, who works in IT security and has a very low tolerance for bullies. When I told him about Derek posting videos of Mason without my consent, he didn't even hesitate. "Send me the links," he said. 2 days later, the videos were gone. Poof. Removed from the platform for privacy violations. Derek, of course, blew up my phone that night. "What did you do?" his first text read. Then, "Do you have any idea how many views that video had?" Then, 30 seconds later, "You're pathetic. Can't take a joke." I didn't respond. Instead, I screenshotted every single one of those messages and added them to the growing folder I'd started. That was step 1, get control of the narrative. Step 2 was about Mason. I took the guitar to the music store for the repair estimate, and while I was there, I talked to the owner, a guy named Paul, who has been running the shop for decades and has seen just about everything. When I told him what had happened, he shook his head. "That's a shame," he said. "But you know what? Kids bounce back. You just have to give them the right push." He showed me a small soundproof practice room in the back of the store and told me they had private instructors who could work with Mason one-on-one. "Sometimes it helps when the kid sees someone other than dad cheering them on," he said with a wink. I signed Mason up for weekly lessons before I even left the store. When I told Mason later that night, his eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. "Private lessons? For real?" "For real," I said. "And I'll be right there the first time, just in case you want backup." That Saturday, we went to his first lesson. Mason was nervous at first. He kept glancing around like someone might be laughing at him. But his instructor, a college kid named Caleb, was patient and encouraging. By the end of the hour, Mason was smiling again. On the way home, he said, "Maybe we don't have to sell the guitar yet." I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost had to pull over. While Mason slowly got his confidence back, I focused on step 3, getting my own life in order. I'd been at the repair shop for years, doing steady work, but I'd never really thought about moving up. Now, I found myself staying late not just out of obligation, but because I wanted to, cleaning up the shop floor, streamlining the inventory system, even talking to the owner about ways to bring in more customers. He noticed. A few weeks later, he called me into his office. "You've been stepping up lately," he said. "I like what I'm seeing. How would you feel about taking on a management role?" I nearly fell out of my chair. "Me? You? It's a pay bump and a lot more responsibility, but I think you're ready." I accepted on the spot. The extra money meant I could pay for Mason's lessons without worrying, and I started putting a little aside every paycheck into a future fund, not just for repairs or emergencies, but for something bigger, something that would set us up in a way my family could never take away from us. I also started getting into shape, not in a new year, new me way, just quietly, gradually, so that every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone a little stronger, a little more grounded. I bought a cheap weight bench for the garage, started going for runs after work, even cut back on the takeout. Mason joined me sometimes, riding his bike alongside me in the evenings, and we'd talk about music, school, life. We were building something new, just the two of us. And the more I focused on us, the less I cared about what Derek and my parents were doing, or at least, that's what I told myself. But I won't lie. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Derek, every time a family group chat popped up with some picture of the twins, I felt that same cold anger stir again. Then came the invitation. Derek's birthday barbecue. My mom wrote in the group chat. Sunday at 3. Everyone's coming. Bring Mason. The twins miss him. I almost ignored it. Almost. But then I saw Derek's reply under it. Better tell Corey to leave the baby guitar at home this time, faced with tears of joy. I stared at that message for a long time. And then I typed a single reply. We'll be there. Mason looked surprised when I told him. Do we have to? Yes, I said, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. We do. Trust me. Because by then, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had a plan, one that would make sure Derek, my parents, my sister, and everyone else there finally understood that the days of laughing at us were over. And when that Sunday came, I was ready. Ready in a way I hadn't been before. Because this time, I wasn't walking into their house as the guy they could push around. This time, I was walking in with leverage. And I knew exactly how to use it. But first, I had to let them show their true colors. One last time. So when I made my move, no one could pretend they didn't deserve what was coming. And as soon as we walked into that backyard, I could already see the setup, the camera phones, the smirks, the twins clutching their bats like props. They thought they were about to humiliate us again. They had no idea they were about to hand me everything I needed. Walking into Derek's backyard that Sunday felt like stepping onto a stage. The smell of barbecue hung in the air, kids were running around barefoot in the grass, and the adults were clustered near the patio, drinks in hand, waiting for the entertainment to begin. I could tell right away that we were the entertainment. Derek spotted us first. Well, he said, spreading his arms like a game show host welcoming a contestant. Look who decided to show up. I just smiled and nodded. Wouldn't miss it. Mason stayed close to me, clutching his backpack strap. He wasn't scared exactly. He'd been getting his confidence back in lessons. But he wasn't taking any chances either. I had told him before we left, you don't have to play. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. Just watch. This is for us. And it was. As the afternoon went on, I watched everything. Every smirk, every joke, every glance exchanged between Derek and my parents. It was like they couldn't help themselves. The twins came over more than once pretending to swing invisible bats, and Derek filmed them, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. Careful, I said casually the third time they did it. You don't want to break anything important. That earned me a chuckle from Derek. Relax, Corey. We're not touching anything you care about today. I smiled, but inside, my plan was solidifying. I wasn't going to just get even. I was going to make sure they understood what they had done and why it wasn't going to happen again. The first piece of information fell into my lap almost by accident. While I was standing near the grill getting a soda, I overheard Derek talking to my dad. So I finally got the promotion, Derek was saying, his voice dripping with pride. New supervisor position starts Monday. I'll be running the whole department. My dad clapped him on the back. That's my boy. See, hard work pays off. I froze. Derek had just gotten a new job, and not just any job, but one at a company I happened to know something about. The owner of that company, believe it or not, was a regular customer at the repair shop. He brought his classic cars in twice a year for tune-ups, and I'd been the one working on them for the past 3 years. We'd talked plenty, and he knew me by name. I felt my mind start to spin. It wasn't that I wanted Derek to lose his job, not exactly. But the idea that I had a direct line to someone who now held Derek's professional future in his hands was interesting. Very interesting. I didn't say anything in the moment. I just filed it away, letting the knowledge settle like a weight in my pocket. Later, while everyone was eating, my mom tried to bait me. So, Corey, she said, did you ever fix that fancy guitar? Or are you still crying about it? The table chuckled. I set my fork down slowly. It's getting repaired, I said calmly. And Mason's been taking lessons. He's getting really good. Lessons? Derek snorted. What, private ones? How much is that setting you back? Don't worry about it, I said with a small smile. I can afford it. That was another thing that had changed since I'd taken the management position. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just scraping by, I was comfortable. I'd paid off the last of my credit card debt, set up a savings account for Mason, even started putting money toward a down payment on a bigger place for us. I could see the way Derek's expression shifted when I said it. Just a flicker, irritation, maybe even envy, before he laughed it off. Good for you, man. Guess somebody's finally getting their life together. I didn't take the bait. I just smiled. Because I wasn't here to trade insults. I was here to gather ammo. The second big opportunity came when my sister, who had been scrolling on her phone all afternoon, leaned over and whispered to me, "You know they still have the video, right?" I turned to her. "What video?" She smirked. "The original. Dad saved it before it got taken down. He says he's going to show it at Christmas. Says it'll be a tradition." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. Interesting. That night, after the barbecue, I went home and wrote everything down. Derek's promotion, the saved video, the comments my mom had made, everything. It was becoming clear that my family didn't just think what happened was funny. They thought it was a permanent joke, something they could pull out and laugh about for years to come. I wasn't going to let that happen. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept building momentum. I went above and beyond at work, impressing the owner enough that he offered me a spot shadowing him on the business side of things, learning about bookkeeping, supply chain, customer management. He said he was thinking about retiring in a few years and needed someone who could eventually take over. That's when it hit me. I was on track to own the shop one day. And if that happened, my financial situation would change completely. That thought fueled me. I doubled down on Mason's lessons too, surprising him one Friday with a brand new hardshell case to replace the one that had been damaged. When he opened it, he ran his fingers over the smooth lining and whispered, "This is way nicer than the old one." "You deserve it," I said. "And when your guitar comes back from repair, you're going to keep it safe. No one touches it unless you say so." Mason smiled, a real, wide smile, for the first time since the incident. "Can I play at the winter recital?" he asked. "Absolutely," I said. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what they'd tried to take from us. Still, revenge was coming. Because when Derek texted me a week later saying, "Family dinner at Mom's next weekend. Don't be late," I knew exactly what I was going to do. I spent the next few days preparing carefully, making sure I had everything lined up. I spoke with my lawyer friend again, this time about legal boundaries, what counted as harassment, what counted as defamation, what my options were if the video was played again publicly. I even had him draft a formal letter. Nothing too aggressive, just enough to make it clear that any future attempts to distribute or display the video would have consequences. By the time Saturday rolled around, I wasn't nervous. I was ready, because this dinner wasn't going to be another chance for them to laugh at us. It was going to be the moment the balance of power shifted permanently. And when we walked into my parents' house that evening, I could feel it in the air. They thought they still had the upper hand. They had no idea what was about to hit them. When Mason and I pulled into my parents' driveway that Saturday evening, I could already feel the tension humming under my skin, but it wasn't the same shaky, tight-chested feeling I'd had at the barbecue weeks ago. This was different. I was calm, collected, almost eerily so. My plan had been turning over in my head for days, refined with every mental rehearsal, and now it was time to put it into action. Inside, the house smelled like roast beef and garlic mashed potatoes, my mom's special family dinner menu. The kind she used to make when I was a kid, before she started letting Derek dictate how every family gathering went. Everyone was already there when we walked in. Derek, his wife, the twins sprawled on the living room floor playing with toy cars, my sister scrolling on her phone, and my parents seated like royalty at the dining table. "About time," Derek said with a grin. "We were starting to think you chickened out." "Not a chance," I said, setting Mason's backpack gently by the wall. I didn't raise my voice or make a scene. I just smiled. Dinner started off deceptively normal. My parents made small talk about the weather, my sister complained about gas prices, and Derek went on and on about his first 2 weeks in his new supervisor position. I nodded in all the right places, even asked him questions about his job, which seemed to inflate his ego even more. He had no idea I was baiting him, letting him get comfortable, letting him think I was back in my usual role as the quiet little brother who didn't rock the boat. And then, Right before dessert, my dad said, "Hey, speaking of funny stuff," and started reaching for his phone. I knew what was coming. "Dad," I said lightly, "before you pull that up, I have something I want to share." Everyone turned to look at me. Derek smirked. "Oh boy, here we go." I stood, calm as ever, and pulled a folder out of Mason's backpack. Inside were neatly printed pages, the screenshots of Derek's texts, copies of the online comments, and the legal letter my lawyer friend had drafted. "I've been doing a little thinking," I said, laying the folder on the table, "and a little research. It turns out posting videos of someone's kid without consent and refusing to take them down when asked can actually get you in some serious trouble, not just with the platform, but legally." My mom frowned. "Corey, don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said, still calm. "I'm finishing it. Here's what's going to happen. You are going to delete every copy of that video you have, right now, and you're going to agree, in writing, never to show it or share it again." Derek barked out a laugh. "Or what? You gonna sue us?" "If I have to," I said, sliding the letter toward him. "This is a formal notice. It's not a joke. The next step after this would be a cease and desist, followed by legal action. I have every screenshot, every message, every piece of evidence I need. So the choice is yours." The room went quiet. For the first time since this whole mess started, Derek's grin faltered. My dad broke the silence first. "Corey, don't be ridiculous. This is family. You wouldn't drag us into court over a joke." "It stopped being a joke the moment my son stopped playing music in his own home because he was scared you'd laugh at him again," I said, my voice sharpening for the first time all night. "You humiliated him. You humiliated me. And you enjoyed it. That ends today." Mason looked up at me, his eyes wide, but I saw the smallest smile tug at the corner of his mouth. Derek leaned back in his chair, trying to play it off. "You're bluffing." I smiled faintly. "Am I?" Then I pulled out my phone, opened my messages, and scrolled to a conversation with the owner of the company Derek now worked for. A friendly exchange, ending with, "If you ever need anything, Corey, don't hesitate to reach out." I tilted the screen so Derek could see. "Your boss is a regular at my shop. Nice guy. Loves talking about his employees. I wonder what he'd think about a supervisor who spends his weekends mocking his own nephew online." That did it. Derek's face turned red, and for once, he had nothing to say. "You wouldn't," he muttered. "I don't want to," I said honestly. "But I will if I have to. So make the right choice." My sister, of all people, broke the stalemate. "Just delete the video, Derek," she said, rolling her eyes. "This isn't worth it." My mom looked from me to Derek, clearly torn, but finally she sighed. "Fine. Get rid of it. All of it." Derek hesitated another beat, then pulled out his phone and started tapping furiously. After a moment, he held it up. "Happy now?" "Not yet," I said. "Show me the trash folder. And the backups." He glared at me, but he did it. One by one, he deleted every copy until I was satisfied. When it was done, I tucked the folder back into Mason's bag. "Good," I said simply. "Now we can eat dessert." The table was silent for the rest of the meal. Derek sulked, my dad muttered something about taking things too far, and my mom kept shooting me disapproving looks, but they didn't say a word about the video again. When we got to the car afterward, Mason climbed into the passenger seat and let out a long breath. "You were awesome," he said quietly. I smiled at him. "I told you. No one laughs at you like that ever again." He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he asked, "Can we practice when we get home?" "Absolutely," I said, and as I drove away from my parents' house, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Derek standing on the porch, arms crossed, his jaw tight. He wasn't laughing anymore, and I had a feeling this was only the beginning, because I still had more cards to play. They thought tonight was about a video, but tonight was about so much more than that. Tonight was about showing them that I wasn't the little brother they could humiliate anymore, and that I was just getting started. Driving home that night, there was a strange quiet between Mason and me, not the tense kind, but the kind that comes after a storm passes and the air feels clearer. He was staring out the window, tapping his fingers against his thigh like he was playing a silent rhythm. I recognized the beat. It was one of the songs he used to practice before the incident. When we got home, he actually opened the guitar case without me prompting him. He didn't play for long, just a few simple chords, but it was enough to make my chest ache with relief. The spark was back, but as satisfying as that night had been, I knew we weren't done yet. I'd forced Derek to delete the videos, yes, But that wasn't the same as accountability. My family had spent months making Mason the punchline of their private joke, and if I left it at that, they'd eventually find a way to spin this back on us. Paint me as the dramatic one. Tell Mason he overreacted. So I decided to close this chapter once and for all. The next morning, I sent out a group text to everyone who had been at dinner. My parents, Derek, my sister, me. I think it's time we take a break from family gatherings. Mason and I won't be coming to birthdays or holidays for the foreseeable future. We need distance. The responses came in quickly. Mom, Corey, don't be ridiculous. Families fight. You don't just run away. Me, this isn't a fight. This is a boundary, and it's non-negotiable. Derek, oh, give me a break. You think you won because you made me delete a dumb video. Me, no, Derek. I think I won because last night was the first time you didn't get the last laugh. After that, I muted the group chat. I didn't want their words poisoning Mason's healing any more than they already had. For the next month, I focused entirely on rebuilding our world. Mason practiced more and more, sometimes leaving his bedroom door open so I could hear the music filling the house. His teacher, Caleb, said he was advancing faster than most kids his age. Then came the recital. Mason was nervous, but he played beautifully, and when the audience clapped, I saw pride flash across his face. Not the forced smile he gave when my parents used to clap sarcastically for him, but a real, beaming grin that made him look like a different kid. After the show, we went out for ice cream, just the two of us. Think Grandma and Grandpa would have liked it? He asked hesitantly. Probably, I said honestly. But we don't need them to clap for you to know you did great. He smiled and nodded, clearly satisfied with that answer. Meanwhile, on the family side, the silence between us stretched longer. My mom tried a few times to guilt-trip me, sending photos of the twins at soccer games, messages like they missed their cousin. But I didn't reply. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a call from Derek. You talked to my boss, didn't you? He snapped the moment I answered. Nope, I said calmly, sipping my coffee. Don't lie to me, Corey. He called me into his office this morning. Said he'd been made aware of some questionable behavior outside of work. Asked me if it was true. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I let a small smile creep into my voice. Maybe he saw the video before it got taken down. Internet has a long memory. You ruined my reputation, Derek hissed. No, I said evenly. You did that yourself. I just stopped letting you hide it. There was a long pause before he finally muttered. You're a real piece of work, you know that? Maybe, I said. But at least I can look my kid in the eye and know I protected him. And then I hung up. After that, the call stopped. The text slowed. Even my parents backed off. I think Derek must have realized that pushing me any further might actually cost him his shiny new job, and my parents, for all their denial, weren't willing to risk more public drama. Months passed. Mason got better and better at guitar. He even started writing his own little riffs, playing them for me in the living room after dinner. The music that had once been silenced was louder than ever in our house, and every chord felt like another brick being laid in the wall I was building between us and the toxicity we'd left behind. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Mason in the garage, guitar in hand, playing for the neighbor's kids. He looked up at me and grinned. They asked me to teach them something, he said. I just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The confidence in his voice, the way his hands moved without hesitation, the laughter of the kids around him. And then I realized, this was the real revenge. Not the legal letter, not the confrontation at dinner, not even the quiet panic I knew I'd caused Derek when he thought his career might be at risk. The real revenge was that Mason had taken back his joy, that he was thriving, playing music again, turning something painful into something beautiful. That night, as I closed up the garage, my phone buzzed. It was a single text from Derek. Derek, guess you got what you wanted. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Me, no. I got what Mason deserved. And then I blocked his number. I went back inside, sat on the couch, and listened to Mason play. The house felt lighter than it had in months. As the last note rang out, I thought about all the times my family had laughed at us, all the times they thought they had the power. And I smiled, not the bitter, angry smile I'd worn for weeks after the incident, but a calm, satisfied one. Because they'd learned the truth the hard way. When you spend years turning someone into the punchline, you shouldn't be surprised when one day they decide to write the ending and make it a masterpiece. My name's Jacob. I'm 33, single, and if you ask my family, that last part is a problem. They wouldn't say it outright, not in so many words, but it's always there, behind the tight smiles and the too long pauses. At every holiday, I'm the one who gets asked if I'm still working from home, even though I run a successful graphic design business. I'm the one who gets seated next to the high chair or the weird uncle, because apparently, you don't mind, right? And most of all, I'm the one who's expected to show up with gifts. Not regular gifts, grand ones. Big, thoughtful, over-the-top surprises that make for a great Instagram post, but never a thank you card. My sister, Brooke, just bought her first house with her fiancé, Nate. 2 stories, open concept everything, quartz countertops. You know the type. It's the kind of place where you're afraid to leave fingerprints on anything. She's 29, works in real estate, and posts so many polished interior shots you'd think she was sponsored by a linen company. I was genuinely happy for her. Really. She'd always been ambitious, and even though she and I weren't close growing up, she was the popular cheerleader. I was the quiet kid who drew in the back of class. I thought this might be a chance for us to start fresh. A few months back, she mentioned, in passing, that she wanted this specific handmade dining set from a local artisan. 6 chairs, a matching table, and carved detailing that was ridiculously expensive. It's too much, she said. But it's like my dream piece, you know? She laughed when she said it, sipping her drink, not even looking at me. But I remembered. Took a few months of late nights, a chunk of my savings, and a lot of careful planning, but I managed to get it custom made for her. Walnut wood, soft matte finish, upholstered seats in that dusty sage green she liked. I even had our family initials subtly engraved under the table lip, a little nod to home and history. I figured it'd be the perfect gift for her housewarming, thoughtful, generous, meaningful. Something that would make her pause and say, wow, you really know me. The housewarming party was on a Saturday. I'd arranged to have the set delivered just an hour before the guests were set to arrive so she'd be surprised and, I'll admit, maybe a little touched. I pictured her hugging me in front of everyone, maybe even tearing up. I hadn't gotten that from her in, well, maybe ever. When I arrived, everyone was already buzzing around with mimosas and tiny charcuterie cups. She spotted me at the door and walked over with a fake smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, she said, looking past me like she expected someone more exciting. You actually brought it? I blinked. Yeah, I said, lifting the edge of the cloth that was draped over one of the chairs. Thought you'd want it to be here before the photos. She didn't even look at it. Just turned to a cluster of her friends and laughed. That's my brother. He means well, but he's kind of our family charity case. Always trying to overcompensate. They laughed. They laughed. I stood there, frozen. My hands still gripping the side of the chair like it was an anchor. My parents were across the room. They heard it. I saw the flicker in my mom's eyes before she turned away and pretended to be fascinated by the guacamole. My dad raised his glass and nodded in my direction, like that somehow counted as acknowledgement. I forced a smile. That tight, polite one you wear when everything inside you is unraveling. Glad you like it, I said softly. I helped set it up anyway. One by one, I unwrapped the chairs, polished the legs, adjusted them so they were perfectly spaced. No one helped. No one even asked where it came from. I stood there while her friends took pictures sitting at it, clinking glasses, calling it Pinterest goals. I found myself drifting through the rest of the party like a ghost. Smiling, nodding, sipping flat soda. People talked over me, around me. Brooke didn't introduce me once. At some point, someone spilled a drink and used one of the seat cushions to blot it up. I bit my tongue. Right before I left, I wandered back into the dining room, adjusted a chair that had been knocked askew, and then quietly flipped it over. I reached into my coat pocket and slid out a folded note I'd written that morning, just in case. My hand hesitated. Then I tucked it under the frame, pressed it flat beneath the seat, and flipped the chair back upright. No one saw. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out the front door with the same polite expression glued to my face. The air outside was cooler than I expected, sharp and bracing. I walked to my car slowly, hands in my pockets, ears ringing with laughter that didn't belong to me. I drove home in silence, replaying the words in my head, our family charity case. The note stayed hidden until the next morning. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about the look on her face, not just the indifference, but the amusement. Like I was a punchline. Like my presence, my effort, the months I spent coordinating that gift, was just embarrassing. I thought I was over it. I wasn't. Not really. The next morning, I woke up to 14 text messages. It started with Brooke. Brooke texted, "What is this?" Jacob, seriously, what is this? What is your problem? Then my mom chimed in. She texted, "Why would you put something like that in her chair? It was supposed to be a nice party. Why ruin it?" There were a few missed calls too, one from Nate, one from Brooke again, and two from an unknown number that turned out to be her friend Chelsea. Apparently, they all read the note. Or maybe Brooke read it aloud for dramatic effect. I don't know. But it made its way around quickly. I didn't respond. Not yet. I wanted to sit in the silence, just for a moment, because that silence, those few hours where they had to sit with my words, was the most power I'd felt in a long time. Let me tell you what the note said. It wasn't some angry rant or profanity-laced outburst. I don't operate like that. What I wrote was simple, controlled, honest. Brooke, this dining set took 4 months of savings, 2 weeks of back-and-forth design edits, and 3 late-night phone calls with a carpenter who doesn't normally take custom jobs anymore. I did it because you said, even just once, that it was your dream piece. You didn't know it, but I skipped a vacation I'd been planning for over a year to afford this. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that finally made you see me as more than a walking wallet or a backup plan. Instead, you call me the family charity case. So here's the charity. I'm done. Keep the furniture. I won't ask for it back. But don't expect gifts, favors, or support anymore. Not financial, not emotional, not anything. You wanted your dream dining set? Congrats. But you'll have to sit at it knowing exactly what it cost. Jacob, I didn't sign it with love. I didn't need to. That morning, the group chat I'd been in with the family for years, the one where we planned holidays and birthdays, went quiet. Then I noticed my name had been removed entirely. My mother must have done it. Or maybe Brooke. Honestly, I didn't care. Not anymore. At noon, my dad called. I debated answering, but curiosity won. His voice was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath. "She's upset," he said. "I know," I replied. "She didn't mean it like that." "Then how did she mean it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because she said it to a room full of people and laughed." I didn't see a trace of regret. There was a pause. Then he sighed, the way he always does when he knows there's nothing left to argue. "Your mother wants everyone to get along. Tell her I'm not the one who needs to change." I hung up. That evening, Brooke posted a picture on her Instagram story, a filtered shot of the dining table, perfectly styled with wine glasses and eucalyptus branches, captioned, "Dreams come true." No credit, no tag, no mention. But I noticed something strange. The chairs were turned slightly, not perfectly aligned like I'd set them, and one was missing from the frame entirely. I smiled. She'd found the note, and I knew it hit its mark. The next few weeks passed quietly. For the first time in years, I didn't get a passive-aggressive reminder about Mother's Day. No guilt-tripping texts, no "since you're good with money" messages, just silence. And then, 2 Saturdays later, something happened that pushed the tension from simmering to a full boil. I was at a local coffee shop when I ran into Nate. Alone. He looked like he hadn't slept. Pale, bags under his eyes, jittery in a way that didn't match the calm, curated vibe he always tried to project. He recognized me, gave a stiff nod, and tried to walk past. But I stepped in front of him. "You read the note too?" He didn't answer, just looked over my shoulder like he wanted to disappear. "She's been crying," he muttered eventually. "Told everyone you blindsided her." I raised an eyebrow. Funny. No one's ever blindsided when I write checks. That stung him. I saw it. Then he said something I didn't expect. "She told me she doesn't know why you're so cold, that you've always been emotionally distant." But honestly, he looked away, then back. "After that party?" I get it now. I stared at him, unsure if that was supposed to be a dig or empathy. "She wants to apologize," he added quickly. "But only if you'll, take the post down." "What post?" I asked. His face paled even further. And that's when I realized she thought I'd gone public. She thought I'd taken this to Reddit, to Facebook, to TikTok, somewhere. She thought I'd exposed her. But I hadn't. Yet. I leaned in just a little. "Tell Brooke I didn't post anything." He blinked. "You didn't." I smiled. "Not yet." Then I walked out, leaving him standing in the middle of the cafe like a deer caught in the middle of 2 headlights. Because if my sister thought that note was the end of it, she had no idea what was coming next. I didn't hear from Nate again after that. And Brooke didn't text, didn't call, didn't even send one of those performative, "Hey, just checking in," smiley face, Messages she usually drops like breadcrumbs when she wants something. The silence should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It was a warning. See, Brooke doesn't go quiet. Not unless she's planning her next move. And I knew, deep down, that she wasn't done, not by a long shot. She might have been embarrassed, humiliated even, but people like my sister don't sit with that kind of feeling. They turn it, repackage it, use it. And that's exactly what she did. 2 weeks after I ran into Nate at the cafe, my mother called. Again. This time, she didn't waste time with small talk. Jacob, she said sharply, did you tell people that Brooke called you a charity case? My heart rate didn't change. I told Brooke how I felt. In a private note. At her party. In her house. That's it. My mother's voice turned brittle. Well, her friends are talking. And now your Aunt Lila is calling me asking why the family's tearing itself apart. Maybe because no one stops Brooke from saying garbage like that in the first place? I replied calmly. She didn't mean it that way, my mom snapped, then immediately softened. Look, it's all gotten out of hand. She wants to talk. Maybe even say sorry. But only if you're willing to be the bigger person. I finished. She went quiet. Always me, I muttered. Every time. I'm the one who has to smooth it over. I'm the one who forgives first. Do you even hear yourselves? There was a rustle of movement, probably her sitting down, then a quiet, she's your sister, Jacob. She's also a 29-year-old woman who insults people who love her in front of strangers. And not one of you said a word to defend me. Not one. Silence again. She misses you, my mom said eventually. No, I replied, my voice low and clear. She misses what I do for her. And that's when I knew I couldn't keep letting them spin the story. I couldn't let Brooke craft this narrative of me being the villain, the bitter brother who blew up over nothing. Because this wasn't nothing. This was a decade of being the family's emotional punching bag. Their ATM. Their fixer. So I made a decision. I logged into Instagram, not mine, but a separate account I'd kept private for years. I rarely posted on it, but I followed enough of Brooke's friends and mutuals to get a good idea of how her world operated. Glossy, curated, fragile. She lived off perception, and that perception was built on a house of glass. I uploaded 3 photos. The first was a time-stamped screenshot of the invoice for the custom dining set, complete with my name, the artisan's name, and the full price. The second was a shot of the table, as I'd originally set it up, clean, beautiful, untouched, taken just before guests arrived. And the third? A cropped version of the note I'd left under the chair. No names. No tagging. Just this caption. Sometimes, you give your heart to people who only value the receipt. Just a reminder that generosity doesn't make you weak, but letting people trample it does. Within hours, the post had been shared over 100 times. Comments poured in, strangers, mutuals, a few of Brooke's friends clearly recognizing the furniture and connecting the dots. One even commented, "Oof, I was at that party." She did say that. Awkward. And then, my phone rang. Brooke. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Her voice was tight, furious, the same sugary tone she used to use when trying not to lose it in front of company. What is wrong with you, Jacob? I didn't mention your name, I said. You didn't need to. Everyone knows. Do they? I asked. Or are you just afraid they believe it because it sounds like something you'd say? She went quiet. Then, you're blowing this out of proportion. You're humiliating me. You humiliated me. Publicly. In front of people I didn't even know. And no one said a word. So now I'm saying something. She scoffed. So this is revenge? You think you're teaching me a lesson? No, I replied. I think I'm reminding you of what it means to hurt someone who used to care. And then I hung up. I thought that might be the end of it. But Brooke, she wasn't done. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Actual mail. Formal letterhead. A notice from a lawyer, not a lawsuit, but a request to cease and desist all defamatory behavior that may result in reputational damage. It was ridiculous. Baseless. But the message was clear. She was scared. And when Brooke gets scared, she lashes out. So I drafted a response through my own lawyer. Just 1 page. My client has not defamed anyone. If the events depicted are not about your client, then no harm can be proven. If they are, then perhaps she should be more concerned with the accuracy of her behavior than its exposure. We sent it. No follow-up. No reply. Just more silence. And then, one by one, I started receiving messages. Quiet, indirect apologies. Not from Brooke, she's still too proud for that, but from the people in her orbit. A friend. An old classmate. Even Nate. Again. She's been spiraling, he texted one night. Said something about losing deals over this. People are asking questions. I didn't reply. Because the truth was, I wasn't interested in watching her burn. I didn't want her reputation ruined forever. But I did want the illusion gone, the perfect sister, the polished mask, the fake humility. And now? Now she had to sit at her dream dining set every morning and remember who gave it to her. What it cost. And how easily she threw it away. About a month after the lawyer letter and the viral post, I started hearing whispers that Brooke had taken her Instagram down. Not just deleted posts. Not just archived content. Gone. Her meticulously curated profile, the one with 30,000 followers, staged lifestyle shots, aspirational branding deals, and carefully timed reels vanished. I didn't notice at first. Honestly, I wasn't checking. But when someone I barely knew from high school messaged me saying, "Bro, did your sister really delete her whole page?" I checked. And yeah, it was wiped clean. The whole thing. Her online persona, the perfect life she built around a lie, crumbled without fanfare. And while part of me expected her to rebuild it like she always did, to rise from the ashes with some dramatic post about growth or boundaries or whatever buzzword she'd latched onto this quarter, she didn't. Instead, she disappeared. I didn't see her again until our dad's birthday dinner a few weeks later. My mom had called, trying to get the family back together, like she always did when she sensed things were fraying past her ability to spin. I agreed to come, not because I wanted to play peacemaker, but because I'd made peace with myself. I arrived 10 minutes early and brought a drink I knew my dad liked. Nothing flashy. Nothing performative. Just thoughtful. Intentional. The house looked the same as always, but when I stepped inside, there was a tension I hadn't felt before. My mother smiled too hard. My dad kept glancing at me like he wasn't sure which version of me he was about to get. I hugged them both, calm as ever, and sat at the table. Brooke came in 15 minutes late. She looked tired. Not in the obvious way, she still had on her signature, effortless outfit and subtle makeup, but the shine was gone. There was a hollowness in her eyes, like the mask had finally slipped and she hadn't figured out how to put it back on. She didn't greet me with a hug. Just a small, awkward, "Hey." I nodded. "Hey." Dinner was strained. My mom kept filling silences with forced laughter. My dad tried to joke about sports. Brooke barely touched her food. She didn't mention the post. Didn't ask about the note. Didn't offer any kind of apology. Just sat there, sipping a drink, as if pretending everything was fine would somehow make it true. Halfway through, she finally spoke directly to me. "So, did you really think I'd read that note and just, what? Cry?" Her tone was half challenging, half weary. I looked at her for a long moment. Not angry. Not smug. Just honest. "I didn't care if you cried," I said. "I cared if you understood." She bristled but said nothing. Our mother jumped in then, quick to patch the hole. "Let's not dwell on all that, okay? We're here to celebrate your father's birthday." But Dad, surprisingly, held up a hand. "No, let them finish," he said. His voice was calm, but firmer than usual. "I think we've all been dancing around this long enough." Brooke let out a soft laugh. "Bitter. You all act like I'm the villain." "I didn't say that," I replied quietly. "But I also didn't put those words in your mouth at the party." "You did. And you embarrassed me in front of everyone online." I met her eyes. "No. You embarrassed yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you." That shut her up. For once, there was no comeback. No sarcastic quip. Just silence. Dinner ended shortly after, but as I stood to leave, she followed me out to the driveway. The air was cool, the sky that soft shade of deep blue just before night fully falls. She stood on the front steps, arms folded, staring at the ground. "I've lost 2 sponsors," she said finally. "Brands. Deals. All of it dried up." I waited. I had to go private. I was getting tagged in stuff. People gossiping. Calling me a gold digger. A narcissist. "You humiliated someone who cared about you," I said, voice steady. "This is the fallout. You don't get to cure it consequence-free anymore." She looked up sharply. "You wanted to punish me." "No," I said. "I wanted to be free of you." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in our lives, I saw real vulnerability flicker across her face. "Do you hate me?" she asked softly. That question, oddly enough, broke my heart a little. "No," I said, and I meant it. "I don't hate you. I just finally accepted who you are." She blinked, like the answer didn't land where she expected. She stepped back, visibly shaken, and said nothing as I got in my car and pulled away. That was 8 months ago. Since then, I've heard from her exactly once, a short email with no subject line and no greeting. Just 2 sentences. I found the initials under the table lip. I cried. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not out of pettiness, but because I didn't need to. See, real revenge isn't fire and fury. It's not screaming matches or public takedowns. It's knowing that, eventually, the people who took you for granted will have to sit at the table you built every day and feel what they did. I didn't ruin her life. I just stopped insulating her from it. And when she sets her wine glass down at that gorgeous walnut table with the sage green chairs and those little carved initials she can't unsee, she'll remember the one person who showed up when no one else did and what it cost her to laugh in his face. As for me, I finally booked that vacation. 2 weeks in Lisbon. No Wi-Fi. No family. Just sketchbooks, long walks, and the sun on my skin. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a charity case. I felt like someone who remembered his own worth and never let anyone forget it again. My name's Marcus, I'm 32, and up until a few months ago, I was the guy in the family everyone conveniently forgot until it was time to pull out a wallet. You know the type. Quiet, single, dependable. I've got a good job in tech. No kids, no big expenses, at least that's how they see me. My family always loved to call me the stable one, which I think was their polite way of saying, the one we can take advantage of without pushback. And for the most part, they weren't wrong. I never really made a fuss about things. Not when my sister Julia forgot to pay me back for the down payment I covered on her first apartment. Not when my cousin Tyler stayed with me for 3 months until he got back on his feet and left without saying goodbye or leaving rent. Not even when my parents asked me to co-sign their second mortgage after Dad's business went belly up. I just smiled, nodded, and did it. That's kind of been my role, the background character holding the scene together, while the main cast gets to live their big, messy lives. But this time was different. It started with the family reunion. We do one every summer, usually rotating between whoever has the space to host it. But since I bought a pretty decent house a couple years ago, one with a pool and a big yard, everyone decided it should be at my place. That first year, I went all out. Catered barbecue, games for the kids, even rented a bounce house. No one offered to pitch in, but I brushed it off. That's what family's for, I told myself. Last year, I did it again. Fewer thank yous that time. A few more comments about the selection of drinks and how come there's no vegan options. Still, I didn't say a word. This year, I suggested we try something different. Rent out a house in the mountains for a weekend. Make it a little getaway. My treat. Everyone jumped at the idea. My mom even called to say how proud she was that I was finally stepping up to bring the family together. That sentence stuck with me for a while. As if hosting for 2 years straight and bankrolling Christmas dinner didn't already qualify as stepping up. But I let it slide. I found a great place through a friend's contact, a private cabin-style home on a lake, 6 bedrooms, game room, kayaks, fire pit, the works. It wasn't cheap, but again, this was me we're talking about. The stable one. I booked it, sent out invites, created a shared Google Doc with directions, room assignments, dietary needs, the whole 9 yards. I was actually excited. I thought maybe this year would be different. It wasn't. The reunion was set for the second weekend of June. I left work early that Friday, picked up a bunch of groceries and snacks, and made the 3-hour drive out. I even stopped to get my mom her favorite brand of decaf tea, because last year she complained the store brand gave her headaches. I remember pulling up to the house, sunlight filtering through the trees, car loaded with supplies, phone buzzing with silence. That should have been my first clue. I unloaded the car. Waited. Texted the group chat. Hey, just got here. The place looks amazing. Can't wait for y'all to see it. No response. An hour went by. Then another. I figured maybe they were just running late. It wouldn't be the first time. I started the grill, grabbed a drink, put on music, trying to keep the vibe light. But something felt off. Eventually, I called my mom. She picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding cheery. Oh honey, she said, laughing like I'd just told a joke. You actually went? I blinked. What do you mean? I've been here 2 hours. Where is everybody? We had it yesterday, she said, still with that tone, like I was the punchline. Everyone agreed it'd be better that way. You know how you get sometimes. A little stiff. You make people uncomfortable. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, wind rustling the trees around me, smoke curling from the abandoned grill. You had changed the date? And didn't tell me. We figured it was easier this way, she said. Less awkwardness. No hard feelings, right? You always say you prefer peace and quiet. I don't remember what I said after that. I think I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there, staring at the lake, feeling like the biggest fool in the world. Then I turned off the grill, packed the car back up, and drove home in silence. I didn't even unpack the groceries. Just shoved them in the fridge and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to 67 missed calls. My phone was buzzing so much it knocked itself off the nightstand. There were texts from my dad, Julia, Tyler, even people I hadn't heard from in months. It turns out, when I left the reunion house early, when I said nothing, I also stopped paying their mortgage. Because that second mortgage I co-signed for? I'd been the one quietly covering the payments for almost 2 years. My parents were supposed to take over after 6 months, but they hit a rough patch and never picked it back up. And I didn't want their house foreclosed, so I just handled it. Until now. See, the payment was due that same weekend. I'd scheduled it manually each month, but this time, I didn't log in. I didn't pay. I didn't call the bank. I just didn't do anything. And now they were calling me like the house was on fire. I sat in bed, staring at the screen, watching messages pile in. Marcus, please call us. This isn't funny. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Can we just talk? My favorite was from Julia. You're being really immature right now. Grow up. I put the phone down, got up, made coffee, sat on the patio and listened to the birds. It was the quietest morning I'd had in years. And as the breeze stirred the wind chimes, I realized something. Maybe being the stable one wasn't the compliment they thought it was. Maybe it was just the name they gave the family doormat. And for once, I didn't feel like laying down and taking it. But that wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. What they didn't realize, what they never even thought to ask, was that I hadn't just been paying their mortgage. I'd also taken over the home insurance, the property taxes, and, believe it or not, I was the one who'd been quietly handling the HOA disputes. See, after Dad's construction business failed, he got a little reckless with the mailbox. Didn't like that it had to be a uniform style. Ended up building a custom iron one with flames on it. Literal flames. HOA wasn't impressed. Fined him twice. Threatened legal action. Guess who stepped in with a lawyer friend to make it go away? They never knew, because I never said anything. I just kept handling the things they let slide. Until I didn't. So when I didn't make the mortgage payment, it triggered more than a misbill. It triggered a domino effect. I got a call from the bank that Monday. Polite, professional. Mr. Thorne, just checking in. Will the payment be submitted today? I paused, holding the phone to my ear. No, I said. Not this time. A silence followed, but the woman didn't argue. Understood. Please be aware that without payment, the account may enter default by the 15th. I thanked her, ended the call, and turned off my phone for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, back in my family's group chat, which I hadn't opened since the reunion, things were apparently unraveling. A friend of mine, who was still in the chat because she once helped organize Christmas gifts for all the nieces and nephews, and then somehow just never got removed, started sending me screenshots. Julia texted, "He's literally letting MOM and Dad go into foreclosure." Tyler texted, "Why would he do that? Just because we changed the reunion date." Uncle Darren texted, "I told y'all he was weird." Then Mom finally chimed in, and I'll never forget this part. Mom texted, "I didn't raise Marcus to be spiteful. He's always been sensitive. This is just him throwing a tantrum. He'll come around." A tantrum. That's what they called it. After everything I'd done. After covering their bills, smoothing over their drama, silently carrying their obligations for years, I finally stopped, and now I was throwing a tantrum? I didn't reply. I just sat with it. Thought about how easy it had been to let them shape the narrative for so long. The quiet one, the sensitive one, the helpful son. Funny how those labels only stick when you stay quiet. But I was done being quiet. The next day, I had a meeting with my financial advisor. Nothing major, just routine check-ins. I've been saving for a second property, something modest in the city, maybe a rental. But when she asked if I still wanted to move forward with that plan, I hesitated. And then I said, "Actually, I think I want to liquidate the joint account." She looked up from her notes. "The one you're using for the Thorne property?" "Yeah, that one." That joint account had been set up when I co-signed the mortgage, mostly to make things easier for me to pay things on their behalf. I never gave them direct access. But now, I was done babysitting. I pulled out the remaining funds, not out of pettiness, out of principle, because for once, I wanted my decisions to benefit me, not them. It wasn't long before the email started. My dad sent a long one, maybe the first one I'd ever received from him that didn't contain a "forward this to 10 people or you'll have bad luck" chain. It was full of guilt-drenched phrases like "we never meant to push you away," and "you know how your mother gets and family doesn't keep score." And that last one? That hit me sideways. Because I hadn't kept score. Not when Julia needed help with tuition and came crying to me at 2 a.m. Not when Tyler got arrested for unpaid parking tickets and needed just a couple hundred to avoid jail. Not when Mom called crying because the roof was leaking and Dad was pretending it wasn't. I didn't keep score. I just kept giving. But now that I stopped, suddenly everyone had a running tally of what they thought I owed them. A week passed. Then another. The bank began foreclosure proceedings. Julia tried calling. I didn't answer. Tyler emailed. I left it unread. Dad sent a letter by mail. I didn't open it. And then came the real kicker. I was sitting in a coffee shop one morning, just enjoying a cinnamon scone, earbuds in, pretending I wasn't watching the world around me, when I got a text from my Aunt Carol. She wasn't usually in the mess. One of the only decent ones in the family. She used to sneak me ginger cookies at Christmas when Mom said I didn't need more sugar. Her text just said, "You might want to check Facebook." So I did. My mother had posted a public status. It read, "Imagine raising a child, loving him, supporting him, only to have him turn his back when you need him most. Some people only care when they're getting praised for it." Guess that says everything. Thousands of likes. Dozens of comments. Neighbors. Church friends. Even her old college roommate chiming in. I sat there, watching it scroll, watching people offer sympathy for the woman who laughed at me over the phone while I stood alone at a reunion I paid for. And that's when something in me shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was done. And that meant things were going to change permanently. Because they thought losing the house was bad. They had no idea what was coming next. I didn't reply to my mom's post. I didn't comment, or like, or send a message. I didn't try to explain my side or argue with strangers who suddenly had an opinion about the son who turned his back on his family. Instead, I just screenshotted it, filed it away in a folder on my desktop titled "Closure," and went on with my day. But in the back of my mind, a plan had already started to form. Because here's something they'd all forgotten, or maybe just never bothered to learn. When I co-signed the mortgage, I became a partial owner of the property. It wasn't just a formality. I had skin in the game. My name was on the deed. Legally, it was just as much my house as it was theirs. I'd let them live there. I'd paid their bills. I'd even covered the renovations when they wanted to redo the kitchen to boost resale values someday. But they never saw it that way. To them, I was the safety net, the backup plan, the invisible scaffolding holding up their crumbling tower. And now that I'd stepped back, they were realizing just how much of the structure depended on me. Foreclosure doesn't happen overnight. There's a process, notices, grace periods, negotiations. But I wasn't interested in dragging it out. I didn't want to destroy their lives. I just wanted my piece of it back. So I contacted a lawyer, explained the situation, asked what options I had for withdrawing my ownership interest in the property. She listened carefully, then leaned back and said something I'll never forget. "Well," she said, "you've already been more generous than most. But if you really want to send a message, you could file for partition." I raised an eyebrow. Partition. It's a legal action that forces the sale of a jointly owned property. Since you're on the deed and they can't afford to buy you out, you can petition the court to force them to sell. You'll get your share. They'll have to move. It was cold, clinical, brutal, and it was exactly what I needed. Because I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it to reclaim something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Control. So I filed. 3 days after the paperwork was submitted, I finally responded to the family group chat. I hadn't opened it in weeks. The last message before mine was from Julia. "Can someone please get Marcus to grow up already?" I didn't reply to her. I sent a single message. "The mortgage isn't your biggest problem. Check your mail." That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning. It took less than 24 hours for the explosion. My phone lit up like it had on the morning after the reunion. Missed calls. Voicemails. Even my dad, who hadn't called me directly in over a year, left a message. "Marcus, please. This is going too far. There has to be another way." Julia sent a long email titled, "You're literally tearing this family apart." Tyler called me 7 times in a row, then texted, "I'll pay you back what I owe. Just don't do this to Mom and Dad." And Mom? She posted another status. This one not quite as vague. Some people hide behind contracts and courts when they don't have the courage to face their own family. But no amount of legal action will undo the damage you've done, Marcus. I hope you sleep well in your big empty house. Again, I screenshotted it, filed it away. The court date came. They showed up, looking tired, angry, and a little confused. My lawyer was cool and collected. The judge listened, reviewed the documents, and ruled in my favor. The house would be sold. I'd get my share. They had 90 days to vacate. And that was when the real silence started. Not the passive-aggressive kind. Not the cold-shoulder silence I'd grown up with when I disappointed them by not laughing at one of Dad's jokes or forgetting to bring deviled eggs to Thanksgiving. This was deeper, emptier. For the first time in my life, they had nothing left to say to me. I didn't go on a victory tour. I didn't brag. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. It's a strange thing, realizing that the people who raised you only liked you when you were useful. It shakes your foundation, makes you question everything, your memories, your decisions, your worth. But it also forces you to look inward, to rebuild, to define yourself by something other than obligation. In the weeks that followed, I started saying no more. No to being the emergency contact for people who never checked in unless they needed something. No to funding holidays where I was treated like the unwanted guest who just so happened to pay the bills. No to guilt-trip birthday parties and passive-aggressive family dinners and whispered gossip about how I'd changed. Because I had changed. Or maybe I just stopped pretending. And then, right when things had started to settle, right when I was finally learning how to live for myself instead of everyone else, I got a knock on the door. It was early evening, sun just starting to dip behind the trees. I opened the door, and there stood my mother, tired, dressed in one of her old cardigans, holding a manila envelope. She looked at me like I was a stranger, like she didn't quite recognize me. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the door, feeling the weight of everything between us. The long years of being the good son, the easy one, the reliable one. The years of birthday parties spent on the sidelines, holidays paid for and barely acknowledged, reunions that felt more like obligations than celebrations. All of it, sitting heavy between us in the space of a few silent seconds. Then I finally stepped back and held the door open. Not because I wanted her to come in, but because I wanted to hear it. The excuse, the apology, or whatever version of the truth she had come to offer. She moved slowly, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. She set the manila envelope down on the entryway table like it might burn her fingers. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask her to sit. I just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and waited. Mom wrung her hands together, a nervous tic I remembered from when I was little, and she was about to scold me for something small. Forgetting my lunch, tracking mud into the kitchen, not smiling enough in family photos. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally. I stayed silent. She paused, searching for the right words. "We didn't realize how much we leaned on you." I arched an eyebrow, but said nothing. "We thought you didn't mind," she added quickly, like rushing through the words would somehow soften them. "You never complained. You always helped. We thought you liked being needed." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully backwards. I liked being part of the family. I liked feeling valued. But being needed? Being used? That wasn't love. That was survival. "You didn't just lean on me," I said, voice low. "You stood on me. And when I couldn't carry it anymore, you acted like I was the problem." Her face crumpled a little. She looked smaller than I remembered. "We were wrong," she whispered. I was wrong. For a second, just a second, I almost let that soften me. I almost forgot the years of being treated like an ATM with a pulse. The wedding gifts they never thanked me for. The graduation parties I wasn't invited to. The vacations they bragged about in front of me, knowing full well I wasn't included, but expected to contribute. Almost. "What's in the envelope?" I asked instead. Mom swallowed. "The house sold." She slid it toward me. Inside was a check, my portion of the sale, minus the fees and taxes. It was a large sum. Enough for a down payment on another house, or a year's worth of travel, or the kind of investment that could quietly double if handled right. I picked it up, weighed it in my hands. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't closure. It was just money. "Thank you," I said simply, and slid the envelope into a drawer. She waited, hoping, maybe, that would be the olive branch. That we could pretend nothing happened. That years of being overlooked and used could be scrubbed away with a few sad eyes and a cashier's check. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Mom, I said quietly, you're not a villain. I know that. You're not evil. You didn't wake up every morning thinking, how can I hurt Marcus today? She blinked, surprised, maybe even relieved. But good people can still do bad things when they're careless, when they're selfish, when they assume someone else will always be there to clean up the mess. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. And you can apologize, I continued, and I can accept it. I do. I believe you're sorry. A tear slipped down her cheek. I didn't rush to wipe it away. But that doesn't mean things go back to how they were. She flinched like I'd struck her. And in a way, maybe I had. Because for people like my mother, the worst thing you can do isn't yell, or cut them off, or even expose them. The worst thing you can do is take away access. Take away the guarantee that you'll always be there no matter how badly they treat you. I love you, I said. And I meant it. But I'm not coming back to the way things were. I'm not the family ATM anymore. I'm not the easy one. I'm just me. And you're going to have to decide if that's enough. She nodded, slowly, painfully, like each movement hurt. Okay, she whispered. Okay. We stood there a little longer, awkward and broken and honest in a way we'd never been before. Then she turned and left without another word. When the door clicked shut behind her, I didn't collapse into tears. I didn't second-guess myself. I didn't even feel hollow. I just felt free. The months that followed were quieter than any I could remember. No frantic holiday calls asking me to cover catering deposits. No late-night emergencies about bounced checks. No guilt-tripped birthday invitations attached to Venmo requests. I bought a new place, smaller, simpler. A little townhouse closer to the city, with a cozy balcony and a coffee shop down the block where the barista already knew my order by the third visit. I started traveling a bit. Nothing extravagant. Weekend trips, exploring nearby cities, hiking trails I'd put off for years. I learned how to sit with myself without feeling like I needed to be needed to have value. And slowly, something even stranger happened. The friends I neglected while juggling family crises reached out. We grabbed drinks. We laughed. Some even apologized for fading away. They hadn't known how much of my life was spent putting out fires that weren't mine. I didn't rebuild the bridge to my family, but I left the door unlocked. Every so often, a text would come through from Julia, a photo of her kids, a simple "hope you're doing well." Tyler sent me a Christmas card, just my name on it. No guilt, no subtext. Even Mom, once in a while, would send a message, thinking of you. And sometimes that was enough. Because I learned something important through all of this. Family isn't about obligation. It's not about blood, or debt, or keeping silent to keep the peace. Family, real family, is about respect. About showing up because you want to, not because you're trapped by guilt or expectation. It took losing everything I thought I had to finally see it. And in losing them, or at least the version of them I clung to, I found something better. I found myself. And I was finally home.